Chapter 1 Liz. It seemed like it was going to be another wretched day at school. I walked into class to see Miss Bitters looking as dark as ever. Dib was my only human friend, and I was his. His sister Gaz wasn't the worst either. She had a hatred for most humans that I greatly admired. Her obsession with video games and pizza, though, wasn't particularly favorable to me. Dib and Professor Membrane were absolutely fascinated by my personal history. Dib and I originally bonded when I told him I have a memory of seeing a large, hairy, humanoid creature during my time in the woods in my early childhood. He's convinced it was Bigfoot, of course, and I wouldn't doubt it. I took my seat behind the empty desk in the front row and prepared for another day of being forced to learn what I don't want to learn. I used to sit next to the window in the back of the class, but I kept staring out the window and imagining that I was free and running about once again. I was eventually moved because sometimes my daydreams became a distraction for the other students, as I would start acting them out in the middle of class. There was a sudden knock on the classroom door, and Miss Bitters went to answer it. I didn't see who was there right away, but I could hear his voice loud and clear. "I am Zim," the voice screamed, "and I will be joining this so-called school so that I may learn." Miss Bitters sighed, annoyed, and led a boy with a green head to the front and center of class. "Class, I would like to introduce the newest, hopeless appendage to the student body. His name is Zim. Zim, if you have something to say it now, because after this moment I don't want to hear another sound from you." Miss Bitters swept back to her desk as Zim stared awkwardly at the class. "Hello, friends. I'm a perfectly normal human worm baby." I glanced at Dib because I knew exactly what he'd be thinking about a green person. His mouth was open and he was pointing directly at Zim in disbelief. "Take your seat now, Zim. You can sit in the empty desk in front of Elizabeth." Miss Bitters pointed to the desk in front of me, and Zim made his way over. I shot up from my seat. "I told you not call me that stupid human given name, Elizabeth. If you must call me something, call me Liz." Zim furrowed his brow at me before taking his seat. Miss Bitters was not amused. "Sit down, Liz." I sat back down. "Today's lecture is about outer space, and how it will eventually implode in on itself." Zim suddenly stood on his desk with both black-gloved hands in the air. "Yes, Zim." "In the event of, say, a full-scale alien invasion, how prepared do you think this planet's defense system would be?" "Tell me." Miss Bitters ignored the green child's question. "As I was saying, the universe is just doomed. 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 Doomed." At this point, I knew Miss Bitters well enough to know that she was gone now. I also knew Dib well enough to know that this would be the time he would take the opportunity to try and point out the true identity of Zim. "Okay, am I the only one here who sees the alien sitting in class?" The other students looked around confused. Dib pointed a shaky finger at Zim. "There! Right there!" I could see the sweat dripping down Zim's green face. "That is no kid. He's an alien. An alien. One of the monsters I've been talking about. He's here to conquer the Earth." I looked over Zim's shoulder to see a self-destruct device on his arm. "Oh, not this again. You're crazy," said the girl behind me. "What about his horrible green head?" Zim turned towards Dib with a fist. "Insolent fool boy. It's a skin condition." "And he's got no ears. Is that part of your skin condition, Zim? No ears?" "Yes." Zim looked down in shame. "Man, Dib, you think just 'cause someone looks different you can call them an alien?" Dib looked straight at me. "Come on, Liz. I know you're smart. I know you can see it, or at least smell it." Everyone looked at me and I stood up. "Very well. I sniff him out and end this." I grabbed Zim's shoulders to hold him steady as I sniffed at his hair. "Hey, what is this? Hands off me, Earth Monkey!" I continued sniffing and could definitely smell that this was a wig he was wearing. I moved my nose down his head to smell his skin that definitely wasn't human. I sniffed near his eyes without touching them to identify the smell of contact lenses, as well as the cleaner. I moved down and sniffed his clothes to identify the smell of ship fuel and other non-Earth elements clinging to his clothes. I suddenly stopped sniffing and looked Zim in the eyes. He raised an eyebrow at me, and I tilted my head before standing up straight in front of his desk. I turned towards Dib and crossed my arms. He not alien. He just from New Jersey. I took another quick sniff above Zim's head and covered my nose with my paw. Ew! Elizabeth, New Jersey. Zim was sniffing at his own armpits, confused. Yes, the human girl speaks the truth. I am from this, New Jersey? Dib got frustrated. What? Liz? Sorry, Dib, you know my nose never lie. I shrugged. Zim looked up at me confused. How are you so good at smelling? I was led to believe that humans had a very poor sense of smell. Well, you see, Zim. I dropped to the ground and started scratching my head with my foot. When I was a small child, I raised entirely by wolves. Wolves? That right. My nose not much stronger than average human, but better at identifying different smells with less effort. Which is why she should be able to smell out the fact that he's an alien. I looked back at Dib. Dib, friend, drop it. But drop it. Dib walked over to the chalkboard and pointed at a drawing of a human and a drawing of Zim. Okay, see, this is us. This is Zim. See the difference? Anyone? Anyone? Questions? I turned so that I was on all fours towards Dib. Yeah, how you draw that so quickly? Man, what's wrong with you? All you talk about is aliens and ghosts and seeing Bigfoot in your garage. I trotted on all fours over to Dib's feet. Now everyone, I know he not give nice welcome to new classmate, but you not start harass him on it. I seem remember how many you treat me when I start at school? We still treat you like that, wolf girl. Exactly. You humans not ones to talk. Zim and Dib glared at each other, and Miss Bitters told us to go home now. I rushed out the door on all fours, and waited outside for Zim. He finally came outside, and I was standing on 2 feet next to the door behind him. I lie for you, you know. Zim turned and looked at me. Eh? I lie. You are alien. Your hair smells like wig, and your clothes smell like ship fuel. Zim started laughing. Ah! I can't do Zim's laugh. Foolish Earth child. I have no hair as a result of my skin condition, and so I wear a wig. As for the smell of fuel, my normal human father is a, mechanic? That's right, a mechanic. No, you definitely alien. But no worry, secret safe with me. I started down the stairs on fours, and Zim began to follow. Exactly why did the Earth creature lie? Because I know what Dib had planned for you. He turned you into authorities and makes sure you dissected. Even if that not your fate. I know how humans treat creatures that different. I looked at the ground and walked on the sidewalk. You were really raised by wolves? That right. And I despise human race for taking me away from that. I happy where I was, and they take me away from my own true family. I never asked for any this. I never asked learn how read, write, and speak English. I never asked live among humans and go school and stand 2 leg and live like them. I hate humans so much. So what you're saying is you're a prisoner? I looked up at my green companion. That right. That why I lie for you, Zim. If Dib right and you intend take over Earth, I want in. You take part in the destruction of your own species? Humans not my species. Wolves my species. Wolves better than humans every way. They stronger, faster, smarter. If you promise spare wolves and world domination, I help you. Your offer is tempting, human wolf child, but Zim does not require help from a filthy earthling like you. Very well, but if change mind, offers still stand. I trotted off ahead of the alien and turned a corner around a hedge to come face to stomach with Dib. I knew it! You lied, Liz! How could you? I trusted you! I thought we were friends! We are friends, Dib, but I not let you do something to Zim. I with you most paranormal investigation, but I not agree what you want done these poor creatures. He's an alien! He's here to take over the world and you don't care? I do care, but you know I hate mankind. I can't believe what I'm hearing. The only person that's smart enough to see that Zim's an alien and she wants him to take over the earth? Dib, I not have time for this. I need to go chase a squirrel. With that, I was off chasing a squirrel and growling. Chapter 2. Irken's Best Friend. I walked into the house of my foster parents, two people that pretty much only took me in for the government money and attention from the media. They're not the worst, though. They at least don't care if I act like a wolf, so long as I don't start howling or barking in the house. I've definitely lived with worse families since I was 6. One family locked me in a cage and treated me like a worthless mutt. Another family resented any feral behaviors that I'd show. If I even started sniffing the air, I'd get hit with a paddle. I trotted in the house and dropped the dead squirrel at my foster parents' feet by the couch. Ugh, Elizabeth, I told you no dead animals in the house. My foster mom moved away from the squirrel and me. It was a fair enough rule, just difficult to remember to follow. I grabbed the squirrel again and carried it to the backyard and ate it for dinner. Once I was finished with my meal, I went back inside and upstairs to my room. Every wall in my room was covered with posters and pictures of wolf and forest imagery. I opened my window, stuck my head out, and started sniffing the air. I inhaled scents of cars and people and dogs and cats and... What's that? It's a smell that was so familiar to me, yet so foreign. I had to investigate it, so I went downstairs and out the front door. On all fours, I sniffed along the sidewalk until I came across a green house, only 3 houses away from mine, where the scent was strongest. I sniffed the path until I was in front of the purple door, and I sniffed the door itself. Finally, the smell registered in my brain. Ship fuel. But it wasn't the kind used on Earth. It was otherworldly. This was Zim's house. I sat on my back legs, threw my head back, and began howling at the top of my lungs. I howled and howled despite people opening their doors and staring at me. I howled until Zim's door opened to reveal Zim, still wearing his wig and lenses. What is the meaning of this? I demand to know. I finally lowered my head and stopped howling. Zim, I found you. I told you, Earth Monster, I do not require your assistance. I'm not here for that. We neighbors. We are? Mm-hmm. I nodded and pointed to my house down the street. They're my house. I smelled you and follow here. Your smelly powers are proving to be impressive, human wolf child. However, I am extremely busy and ask that you please leave my property before I set my gnomes on you. I looked around at the lawn gnomes, then back up at Zim. As you wish, green sir. I turned and left the premises. A couple of days later, I was sitting at my usual spot by the lunch table, across from Dib and Gaz. Dib was glaring at Zim from across the room, as some blonde girl was talking about how Zim didn't have any friends. After a while, Zim approached our table and started to address me. Human wolf child, I ask if you would accept the honor of fulfilling the role of my so-called friend. Accept. Before I could answer, Dib interrupted. Don't do it, Liz. He's just using you. You're better than this. Silence, stinkhuman! Zim shouted at Dib. Now, Dib, remember how much trouble you and I have making friend. Gee, I wonder why, Gaz stated sarcastically. Even if he alien, I think he deserve companion. I looked back up at Zim. I accept. What? Dib was in disbelief. Excellent. Now come with me. I dropped from the table and followed Zim to the table with the blonde girl. I put my front paws on the table and looked up at the girl. I'd like you all to meet Liz. She's my new friend, not yours, mine. Get lost, losers. Very well, but know that I am getting lost with my best friend. Zim crossed his arms and stared at the others before grabbing me by the collar and dragging me outside for recess. We played fetch with a stick all during recess. When I caught him a rat and laid it at his feet, he only winced for a moment before grinning and patting my head. The couple of times I brought Dib a dead rodent, he kicked it away, or picked it up with a doggy bag and threw it in the trash. Same with my foster parents. After recess, we went inside for arts and crafts time. Zim drew a sketch of him and me with our names and the word friends underneath. I made a picture of Zim and the wolf that I see myself as walking together. We both shared our drawings with the other students, who just looked on judgmentally. At the end of the day, I walked Zim all the way home, up to his front door. I want to congratulate you, Liz, on a job well done. You've been a most convincing friend, but now that the world seems satisfied with my knack for companionship, I won't be requiring your services any longer. Our mission together is done. Good job, soldier. Be gone with you. I realized what he had done. I had been used for a sucker to cover up his alien disguise. I shouldn't have cared, but I did. I really thought we were friends and that he had an interest in me, but now I see it was all a ruse. I lowered my head and looked up at Zim with big, sad eyes. Zim tried to resist the eyes, but like many before him, he failed. Oh, fine. I suppose your service could be extended, but only because it would benefit you to be alongside me. I jumped on Zim and started licking his face with glee. Ah, disgusting! Get off, filthy human, get off! I backed away from my green companion. No more of that, though. Got it? Zim said as he wiped the saliva off his face. I nodded with my tongue out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to work, so we will continue this friendship tomorrow. Zim slammed the door in my face, and I sat there for a moment before turning around and making my way to the membrane house. When I reached the property, I sat in front of the door and started howling, the way I always announced myself to Dib's house. I howled until Dib opened the door to let me in. Liz, come in, you're just in time for mysterious mysteries. I excitedly ran inside and jumped up on the couch next to the gaming Gaz. Dib sat on the other side of me, and I curled up on the middle cushion with half my face buried in my wrist. While we were watching, Dib scratched at my head and neck. I love how I'm treated like a family dog here. Chapter 3. Parents. The clock struck 3 and the bell rang for us to go home. Everyone hopped out of their seats and I started to tail Zim out the door on all fours. Don't forget, tonight is parent-teacher night. Everyone is required to bring their parents to the cafeteria. Zim stopped at the door and I nearly bumped into him. He turned and started to argue with Miss Bitters, and I watched and waited next to the door. I never agreed to attend this parent-teacher night. Yes, you did. No, you lie. You lie! Miss Bitters pulled out a disc and lowered the projection screen. The screen showed Zim at his desk playing with a pencil. Zim, are you going to bring your parents to parent-teacher night? Yeah, sure, whatever. The video ended and we all looked up at the camera above the blackboard. Why would you tape that? Dib suddenly joined the conversation. Putting up a lot of a fight for something as simple as parent-teacher night, Zim. I bet he doesn't even know what parents are. Zim started gazing off into the distance. Of course I do. For some reason he started hugging Miss Bitters, which made her unhappy. She growled at him before swooping away. You will be here tonight, Zim. You and your parents. Zim started walking towards the door, and I turned to leave as well, but Dib still had one thing left to say. Yeah, see you and your parents tonight, Zim. Yes. Oh, I will bring my parents, and they will be the greatest, most parental parents ever. Zim and I walked home together. What's Zim do? I asked my green companion. I shall think of something. Zim has a brilliant mind that has never failed before and will not fail now. What you think of not be worse than bringing my foster parents tonight. They not care about anything. I had explained all about foster parents to Zim. When we reached Zim's house, Zim's robot mom was brushing the teeth of some sales lady who ran off. Zim's adorable robot dog ran after her. No, wait! Come back! I need stuff! I looked at Zim. Guess I see you tonight, Irken friend. And I was off again to my house. I entered the house and found my foster parents sitting on the couch, watching TV like always. I put my chin on my foster mom's cellulite-covered lap. Without looking at me, she asked, What is it now, Elizabeth? I told you it, Liz. Tonight parent-teacher night at school. You two come and see Miss Bitters. My foster dad scratched at his big hairy back. Oh yeah, you go to school, don't you? I forgot about that. Yes, and tonight you come meet with teacher. 1 hour, so be ready. I went outside and started digging in the backyard until it was time to go. Come on, Liz, let's go meet with your stinking teacher, my foster father yelled from the back door. The three of us took the city bus to school. When we reached the cafeteria, my guardians headed straight for the buffet table. I saw Dib, Gaz, and a screen of Professor Membrane's face talking with Gaz's teacher. I trotted on all fours over to them and nudged Dib in the arm with my head. Hey, Liz! Dib grinned down at me. It's nice to meet you, Professor. I'm Mr. Elliot, your daughter Gaz's teacher. I'm sorry, but I'm very busy right now. We're testing some very unstable... No! Some beeping started from off-screen, and the professor was trying to fix it, but there was an explosion across town that could be seen from the cafeteria window. The screen went blurry, and was replaced by the words, Please stand by. My ears pricked up, and I turned to see Zim enter with his robot parents. I approached him happily. Zim, you made it! Of course, human wolf creature. Have you met my parents? He grinned and gestured up to the robots. I barked cheerfully at the bots, and the mom bot bent over to get a better look at me. Oh, what an adorable puppy! Don't you think so, dear? The dad bot removed his pipe from his mouth and pondered. Yes, very puppy-like. I turned to Zim. I think they're convincing enough. Zim led his bot parents over to Miss Bitters and cleared his throat for her attention. These are my parents, I love them with all my heart. There was an awkward pause. I must have punch now! Zim rushed over to the food table, and I followed while the bot parents socialized with the real parents, and so did my foster parents. While we were keeping an eye on the parents, Dib and Gaz approached with Professor Membrane's live stream. Hello, Zim. Dib. Boys, must you do now? I asked. Yes, Liz, Dib told me before addressing his father. Dad, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Zim. You know, the alien. The screen floated towards Zim. I sighed with relief that Membrane thought Dib meant foreigner. Zim knocked Dib's punch in his face, and Gaz laughed. I shook my head and started licking the punch from Dib's face. The dad bot ate a cookie and started groaning in pain. Oh no! Honey, is it? Yep. Diarrhea, the dad bot said very dramatically. I have just the thing for that, stated the mom bot before throwing a glass of punch in the other bot's face. The bot began to malfunction and started slamming into the wall. The mom bot turned back to the woman she was talking with. Who does your hair? The bot then started poking the woman in the face. I found the whole scene to be amusing, but I knew I had to help Zim fix it. I rushed over to the area, and Zim approached the mom bot. Mom, I think we should go home now. The robot stopped poking the woman and turned to Zim. Don't tell me what to do, young man. You go to your room. She then threw Zim into a bowl of punch and rolled off. When Zim jumped out of the bowl, Dib took a cup of punch and dumped it on Zim. While Gaz laughed, I barked angrily at Dib. I hated how my two best friends fought like this. Zim rushed towards the dadbot, who was still slamming into the wall. Mr. Elliot stepped towards Zim. Hey, is your dad feeling well? Yes, he's perfectly fine. The bot finally stopped abusing the wall with his body and started to short out his arm. The arm flew right off and landed at Mr. Elliot's feet. Mr. Elliot screamed, and Dib left next to me. Nothing to worry about. My dad lost his arm in, the war. That was my squeezing arm. The dadbot dropped to his knees. They took my squeezing arm. Why, my squeezing arm? Ah! Zim grabbed the dadbot by his still intact arm and started dragging him towards the mombot, who was still poking the other woman. My fosters had passed out near the food table from too much standing for too long. They're dangerously lazy. I trotted over to Mr. Elliot and picked up the mechanical arm in my teeth, then tailed Zim. Look, Mom, we really have to go now, please. The bot turned to Zim. Oh, honey, you're upset. Yes, and I want to go home. I feel ya, Zim, I feel ya. I know what'll cheer you up. Both bots started doing a traditional folk dance. My jaw opened, dropping the arm, and I started to back away slowly. Thankfully, everyone else's attention was on the poked lady, except for Dib, who was watching with his drink. Look, everyone, look! Everyone looked, but they didn't care. Can't you see this woman is suffering from severe pokey trauma? Mom, Dad, I think I've broken my spine. My spine. Ah! Zim screamed in pain. The robot stopped dancing and the mombot bent down towards Zim. Oh, honey, I think it's time we took you home. She picked up Zim, who grinned at me and Dib. The robots grew rockets and flew out the window just as my fosters were waking up. Dib pouted. Let me guess. Nobody else saw that, right? We both looked at the rest of the crowd to see their backs all turned. My foster mom approached me. Liz, I think we've had enough fresh air for this week. Let's go home. I grabbed the robot arm in my teeth again, and the three of us went back home. Before I went inside, though, I stopped over in front of Zim's house and dropped the arm outside the property. I began howling until Zim came outside. Earthling, you don't have to do that every time you come over. It's how I announce myself. I picked up the arm again and approached Zim, dropping the arm at his feet. I brought back robot arm. Zim picked up the arm and pet my head with a roll of the eyes. Thank you, wolf child. Chapter 4. CooCoo. Another few days later, we were all outside for recess. I wasn't sure why, but I now feel the need to spend as much time with my friend Zim as I can. He's nearly all I can think about. Every day I walk him home after school. I've been in his house enough times and seen him without his disguise. I absolutely love Gurr. He reminds me of some of the pups in my old pack. Dib and I don't talk much anymore. I haven't been to his house in over a week, and I used to go at least 3 days a week. I miss him, of course, but he's the one that's acting like such a pup and bullying Zim all the time. I tell Dib to stop, but the more I defend Zim, the more Dib seems to despise him. During recess, the child was hit in the gut with a ball. My organs! Zim started laughing at the boy. Inferior human organs! A ball then hit Zim in the same area. Ah, my squiddly smooch! I was on all fours, near the trash can, and smirked. "That why I not stand on 2 legs, Zim?" Back in class, Miss Bitters was lecturing us on the Black Plague. "So you see, Ring Around the Rosie refers to the horrible symptoms of a horrifying disease." At that moment, a pigeon flew in through the open window and perched itself on Zim's head. I started reaching up to snatch myself a better than school-served lunch, but was interrupted. "Zim!" Zim sat up at Miss Bitters calling on him. "Sir!" "There's a pigeon on your head. You've got head pigeon. Get to the nurse before they spread to the other children." Zim climbed out of his desk. "Yes, Miss Bitters." "No leaving class without a hall pass, Zim." Zim turned back to the teacher. "Of course." Miss Bitters gave him a neck device that would explode if he left the premises. While Zim was near Dib, Dib started whispering to Zim, but thanks to my superior wolf ears, I could hear every word. "You know, Zim, when the nurse examines you, she'll notice you don't have human organs. Then it's just a short step to a hospital, and from there to an alien autopsy table, and then you're just another segment on Mysterious Mysteries." I started growling lowly towards Dib, as Zim turned to him. "I'll be fine. I bet my squeedly spooch on it." As Zim exited the classroom, I told him, "Later, little buddy." A few minutes later, Miss Bitters was talking about the rats of the plague. I raised my hand because I had something to say on the subject. "Us wolves eat rats. If weak humans let more us in villages, we catch vermin, and more you survive." "You're not a wolf," came from the back of the class. Dib raised his hand, and I looked to see a pencil sticking out of his nose. I love this because it's kind of like Liz was unknowingly the distraction that Dib needed to break the pencil and put it in his nose. I just like that it's kind of nice and subtle and clever, if I do say so myself. Anyway. "Miss Bitters, I think a pencil is lodged in my brain. Can I go to the nurse?" "How far in your brain?" Dib looked down at the pencil. "Pretty far." "All right, take the auxiliary hall pass." Miss Bitters pointed to a large radiator. Not long later, the bell rang for lunch. I pranced down to the cafeteria to find everyone pale and groaning in pain. Zim wasn't at our usual table, but I found Gaz tapping her lap, which was glowing. "Gaz, what's going on?" "Go away, she-wolf. I'm almost done with this level." I backed away from her and suddenly heard a pigeon cooing. I looked over to see an extremely large and lumpy Zim sitting at our table. I rushed over to him. "Zim, what happened to you? What you do?" I was now on 2 legs. "Oh, nothing, just—" We were interrupted by Dib running over. "That's it, Zim! This has to stop!" I shook my head while staring at Zim. "You know, me not help but agree with Dib this one." Dib looked at me surprised. "You do? Of course you do, Liz." Zim played dumb. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about." "Look at you! You've gone too far!" I nodded in agreement with Dib. "You're a hideous blob of stolen organs." "I've been working out." Zim started gagging, and an intestine spilled out of his mouth and landed around me and Dib. Zim slurped it back in like a noodle and smiled. I wasn't grossed out by any of it. Come on, I eat raw rats and squirrels. In fact, 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't have had quite enough restraint to keep myself from feeding on those intestines. Meat is meat, after all. What unsettled me about this was how he had stuffed himself like this. 1 of each organ would have sufficed. "You think you could fool a trained medical professional?" "Yes." "I suppose you've got a heart in there." "6 of them." "Intestines?" "Large or small?" "Spleen?" "In 3 different colors." "What about lungs?" Zim raised a hand and was about to answer, but stopped. He brought out his mechanical legs from his pack and rose to the vent. "You won't find lungs on my watch, Zim!" Dib turned to me and grabbed my shoulders. "Liz, we've got to stop him from stealing any more organs." I nodded and we looked around the cafeteria. We found Torque, who was colorful, eating, and lifting a dumbbell. Dib and I rushed over to him. I was back on all fours. You look like you've stood out all your organs. Torque tapped at his chest. Yeah, so? You're in danger. Come with us, Dib told him. I have to go lift things. Dib glanced at me and hesitated. Then we'll go with you. We were all walking down the hallway, and Torque kept lifting as Dib explained everything to him while frantically looking around. I was on fours, walking next to Torque, who looked down at me after Dib ranted for a while. Is he always like this? I looked up at Torque. Yeah, you get used to after a while. All of a sudden, Torque was no longer next to me. I looked up again to see him being dragged towards a vent by a mechanical spider leg. I looked back at Dib, who still hadn't noticed. Dib? He looked at me swiftly. Yeah, Liz? He saw that Torque was gone. Oh no. Oh yeah, I told him. We then heard some zapping sounds coming from one of the rooms, and we ran to the dark taxidermy room just as the zap stopped. Torque Smacky, is that you? Dib turned on the light, and I started sniffing the ground and the air for either the scent of testosterone, alien, or pigeon. We searched and searched the room, but couldn't find anything. Come on, man, talk to me. Let me know you're still here. I caught it then, the scent of the pigeon and the scent of the alien. But at that point it was too late. The metal leg had wrapped itself around me and pulled me into the vent. Zim held me down with a hand over my mouth. I could hear Dib searching for me below. I bit Zim's hand and he hissed quietly. If you must take organ from me, take my skin and replace it with flesh and fur of already dead wolf, I told him. I'm more wolf than human inside, so make same outside. I don't need your flesh, puny wolf child. Well, no take any more organs. You have more enough already. Since you've been my only real friend since my coming to Earth, I will spare you and you will feel grateful, Zim whispered. I do feel grateful, I nodded. Good. Zim grinned before lowering himself down to chase after Dib. My heart was racing like it does after chasing a rabbit for a mile, and I sighed. Zim really does think of me as his friend, even to the point where he spares me over every human. He didn't have to do that. At the end of the day, Zim was cleared of his head pigeon and deemed one of the healthiest boys the nurse had seen. Dib was accused of being a human-cow hybrid because Zim had replaced his lungs with a moonmaker. I spent that evening at the membrane house. Chapter 5. Splash. I was finally talking about Zim and Dib again, but could still never talk to them together without them fighting. I now alternate evenings at Zim and Dib's houses. I like my time at Zim's house because he monologues his plans to me for conquering the earth. He's also promised to spare every wolf and possibly let them be soldiers that have a higher ranking than the humans. I very much like that idea of his. I enjoy my time at Dib's house because of the way he scratches at my ears and at my belly while watching mysterious mysteries. After the show, he talks so passionately to me about the paranormal, and I listen to him like no one ever does. Dib and Zim are both always telling me what a good listener I am. For lunch, I mix up who I sit with depending on how I'm feeling. Melvin had been caught eating paste, and Miss Bitters just about punched the entire class. So, young man, now you see there's a price to pay for eating paste. Would you say losing the use of your mouth was worth it? She had pasted his mouth shut, and he nodded. Zim laughed. Stupid silent blue boy. There was a rumble of thunder outside, and I started shaking my tailbone with excitement. I absolutely love the rain. It brings out all the smells of everything so clearly. Zim looked out the window nervously as single drops of rain tapped the window. Dib was at his side in a split second. What's wrong, Zim? Don't they have rain on your planet? Of course. Such rain we had. It was delicious. The thunder clapped and the lightning flashed, and Zim looked even more nervous. The bell soon rang, and we all ran outside to enjoy the rain. I was on all fours, prancing through the rain, barking, howling, rolling in the wet grass, getting absolutely soaked. Zim stepped into the rain and started screaming and steaming. He started running about, and I stopped my enjoyment to watch him. Zim ran under a tree where the rain wasn't so strong. I bounded towards him and started licking the rain from his skin. "Stop this, you—" Zim started to relax. "Hey, that feels nice. Continue." When I was finished, Zim looked and saw Gaz walking with an umbrella. He suddenly started running and battle-crying towards her. I thought he was going to steal her umbrella, but instead he lifted her above his head to shield himself from the rain. "If you want to keep all your limbs, Zim, you'll put me down. You'll put me down now." The rain quickly stopped and the sun came out. Zim set Gaz down, who went to retrieve her umbrella. While Zim was admiring the ceasing of the rain, I trotted out to his side, and Dib jumped in a puddle in front of Zim that splashed all three of us. Zim started screaming again and rolled around on the ground. I went back to licking at his skin, and he calmed down some more. "Oh, I'm sorry, Zim. I meant for that to be a bigger splash," Dib told Zim. Tonight was a Dib night for me, so I followed Dib and Gaz home. Gaz was giving Dib a hard time for splashing us. "That was your fate of the world work, jumping in a puddle? You do realize I'm going to have to destroy you now." Dib was too joyous for Gaz's threats. "It was worth it. Score 1 for the human race, score nothing for the Zim thingy race. They called Irkens," I told Dib. "Doesn't matter. Now that I know water causes him extreme discomfort, I can use this to my advantage." "Will you ever stop destroying my best friend?" I asked Dib. "I thought I was your best friend. When did it become the alien?" While Dib was looking at me, Zim snuck up on him and started screaming in his ear. Dib freaked out and fell into a puddle. "The alien wasn't the one to fall into a puddle." Zim grinned down at Dib. "All right, Zim, you want to play this way? I'll get you back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, watery vengeance will be mine." I rolled my eyes. The next day we were all working with paste at the craft table in the back of the room. I was sitting with my back to the front of the class. Zim to my left and Dib to my right. The two were glaring at each other from across the table. Dib suddenly ducked away from his seat and slightly turned on the faucet behind Zim. The faucet started dripping away, and Zim was frozen in fear. Every drop made him wince in pain. I couldn't stand to watch this happen, especially with Dib's sadistic smile. I got up from my own seat and turned the faucet back off. Zim started breathing somewhat normally again, and Dib just crossed his arms in defeat. The bell rang and everyone exited the building. Tonight was a night at Zim's house, so I was on all fours walking beside him. He kept looking frantically around to be sure Dib wasn't about to do anything. We also had to be sure to avoid the large puddles on the sidewalk. "Hey, Zim!" We looked up to see Dib bouncing a water balloon in his hand. In the blink of an eye, he chucked it at Zim. The balloon didn't burst right away, but instead bounced around Zim and the ground before bursting in Zim's face. I quickly started licking him as Dib approached. How advanced is an alien race that can't handle a little water balloon? I don't even feel good about winning this one. Zim got up off the ground and I sat between the two to keep them from getting any more physical. "You win this round, perhaps, but watch your back, Dib. Now that I have access to your water balloon technology, I will annihilate you down to your every last cell. On Monday, we settle this like children." Zim and I went back to Zim's house, but when we got there, he opened one of his entrances to the lab. "I'm sorry, Wolf Monster Liz. I can't spend my usual time with you tonight or this weekend. I must work on my plans to get revenge on the Dib's child." "Can I help?" "Not likely. I'll be working alone on this one. But in case I do need you, take this. Zim handed me a futuristic digital watch. We can use it to communicate when we're not together. That way, if I know you're coming over, I can wait outside instead of you doing that stupid howling thing to draw attention to the base. I put the watch on my wrist. Nice. Thank you, Irken Overlord. Zim laughed. Ah, you are precious, aren't you? He stroked my head. Now be gone with you. I left the house and made my way to the membrane house and started howling. Gaz eventually opened the door and let me in. The big-headed loser is working on his stupid plans to beat that stupid Zim on Monday. He said not to bother him until it's Monday. I pouted and lowered my head on the couch. Monday morning I was awoken by my wrist vibrating. I tiredly opened my eyes and hit a button to see Zim's face. Liz, let me ask you, how good are you at swimming? Huh? Me good, I guess. Wolf pups learn swim early. Because my plan to get revenge on the stinky human will involve a great deal of water. But I don't want to put you in that level of danger. To be safe, I want you to come to my ship and watch my plan from afar. What's Zim talking about? You dare question Zim? I'll explain everything later. Just come to the base now. Zim then hung up and I forced myself out of bed. I quickly dressed in my usual grey wolf shirt and black elastic pants and made my way over to Zim's house, where Zim was already waiting outside. Finally! You took forever. I don't have all day, you know. Zim led me into his little Irken ship, and we took off. Not only was it my first time in his little flying machine, but it was my first time in any flying machine. I was looking out the window at how small everything was getting. My stomach churned at the incredible height, but somehow the rest of me knew that I could trust the flyer of this craft. We were up in space where there was a giant red rubbery smiley face. You tell me exact plan now? Of course, my stinky companion. I am going to take every bit of water from the area and use it to fill this giant water balloon. I will then proceed to drop it on the ginormous head of the dipchild. Am I not a genius? Well, with water balloon that size, it'd flood whole city. I stared at the water balloon. That's right. Including your base? Yes. Oh, but don't worry. I have bathed myself in paste so that the water no longer burns my skin. Not exactly what meant, but silence, Earthchild. It's time to put the plan into action. A twister of water spiraled towards us and into the water balloon. Zim grinned and put on some metal gloves that he used in the tying of the balloon. He then brought up a screen of the Earth and zoomed in until it showed Dib's terrified face. He labeled Dib as the target. This madness, I stated. I love it. Zim chuckled at my admiration of his work. He then released the water balloon and it dropped towards the Earth. The two of us watched on the screen what was happening on Earth's surface. People scattered and screamed, but it was no use. Dib only stared up in horror at the giant face hurtling towards him. The balloon lingered and then burst on the flagpole, causing everything to be washed away. Zim sat beside me, laughing maniacally. I joined in by howling with triumphant joy. Chapter 6. Dig In. Everyone was going around the classroom and saying what they want to be when they grow up. There was the standard doctors, veterinarians, astronauts, and the like. Dib said he wanted to be a paranormal investigator that hunts down aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, and other mysterious creatures. Zim and I had very similar career choices. While Zim wanted to take over the human race and be ruler of all mankind, I wanted to bring together every wolf on Earth. With an army of the thousands of wolves working together, we would take down the human race so that wolves are the dominant creatures of Earth, instead of the stupid humans. Either way, Zim and I both wanted to dominate the Earth. The school has instituted these tests, Miss Bitters explained. From these questions we will determine your future careers. Then you will be partnered with an adult who works in your field. You will spend the rest of the day observing them and getting used to your wretched fates. Miss Bitters started handing out the test that had 3 black blotches with a line next to each blotch. Write what you think each blotch looks like on the line next to it. Answer each one carefully. Your future depends on it. Dib looked confused at the paper, and then at Miss Bitters. What does identifying blotches have to do with determining our future careers? Oh, you poor doomed child. The timer began, and we all started writing. For the first blotch, I wrote, Wolf Pup. For the second, I wrote, Full Moon. And for the third, I wrote, Wolf Den. Zim kept scratching at his neck in front of me. Time's up. Pass your papers forward, Miss Bitters shouted. A giant machine dropped down from the ceiling. The machine will now decide your fate. She placed each test into the machine, which then spat out a single piece of paper. Brian, you're going to be a fireman. But I wanted to be a doctor. Quiet, the machine has spoken. Sarah, you are going to be an astronaut. Sarah started crying. Spoo, you will be a veterinarian. But I'm allergic to animals, I barked with laughter. Dib, you will be a paranormal investigator. Dib threw his hands in the air. Yes! Miss Bitters looked at me. Liz, you're going to be an archaeologist. I pondered for a second. Well, I am better digger than any human I know. I take it. Zim, the machine says the only career you're suitable for is, yes, yes, Lord of Humans! I will rule you all with my iron fist. That it? I grinned. Take them, Zim, and make wolves dominant species of Earth. No, Zim. The machine has assigned you a career in fast food preparation. With the same spice as before. I will prepare food with an iron fist. Then I will work my way up to ruling you all with my fist. Zim got into Melvin's face. You, obey the fist. Miss Bitters floated to the door. Now, children, find your partner. The door was open, and we all went into the hallway to see a bunch of adults. Zim and I stared out at the crowd as Zim scratched away at his neck. What's the matter with your neck, Zim? Dib asked behind us. Some kind of alien spore? Of course not. I figure out what is for you, Zim. I put my front paws on his shoulders and started sniffing his neck where there were sores. Some skin irritation, but I'm not figuring out what. I at least say not fatal. Unfortunately, Dib said. A man with a giant boil on his face wearing a McMeaty's hat came up to us. Where can I find Zim? I am Zim. Take me to the meet, Zim demanded. The man explained that Zim wasn't ready for meet until the next promotion, but Dib wasn't finished. Looks like I'll be teamed up with a respected investigator, Zim. He's sure to see through your pitiful disguise. And then we'll take you back to his secret lab. Then we'll perform all kinds of tests on you. Horrible tests! I sure you will, Dib. Good luck, you both. I trotted off and found a heavy-set woman in all brown, carrying a pickaxe and wearing a tool belt. You Elizabeth? The woman said boringly. Liz? And yes, I said up to her. How come you're crawling like that? I was raised by wolves, ma'am. I always walk all fours. All right, let's go. As soon as the woman got outside, she lit herself a cigarette. I learned her name was Susan, and we got into her car, and she drove us to the digging site outside of town. The site was hot and dry, and filled with about a dozen people digging in the ground. This is pretty much all there is to it. If you find anything, bring it to the boss. She pointed to a man sitting under a wall-less tent with a big jug of icy water. He was sitting back in his chair with his feet on the table. Susan led me to a somewhat empty area, and told me to start digging. I started sniffing around the ground until there was a strong scent of marrow just a few feet away from the starting point. I started digging with my paws like my pack parents taught me. Don't expect to find anything right away, Susan shouted with her back to me. I've been doing this gig for 13 years, and the only thing I ever found was a mastodon toe in a clay pot. About 12 seconds later, I had reached my target. I find something? Yeah, right. Susan came over and looked down at my finding of an ancient human skull. Huh. Well, would you look at that? Susan took out a small brush and started dusting the dirt away from the skull and the area around it. Within minutes, we uncovered the entire skeleton, wrapped in animal skins. You found this thing with nothing but your nose? That right? Guess being raised by wolves ain't such a bad thing, is it? Susan gave me a solid slap to the back. I prefer wolves to people. But Susan was ignoring me to get the boss. At 4:30 the shift ended, and Susan decided to take us to McNeady's. This was perfect for me to check up on how Zim was doing. We arrived at a couple minutes to 5 o'clock. I approached the counter where Zim was and stood on two legs. Hey, Zim, how... Oh, great Balto! I noticed the skin irritation had gotten far worse for Zim. What happened to you? It's the equinox, Zim whisper shouted, making sure no one else was listening. All aliens that aren't on their home planets go through a brief molting in exactly 3 minutes. Zim, we need hide you. I tried to come around the counter. I can't. The shift manager won't let me take my break. I grabbed Zim by the shoulders. Zim, you gonna let some stupid human dominate you like this? This bigger than your work in fast food. Now come on. I went back down on fours and dragged Zim by the hand with my mouth. I dragged him to the walk-in freezer and threw him in. This should do. How bad is molt? Is painful? I don't know. I've never experienced it before. Zim growled at me. I looked at the clock behind me and saw that it was about to strike 5. I closed the freezer door and told him to shout when the molt is finished. There was a moment of silence behind the door. Suddenly Zim started making a strange gurgling noise, and a green jelly-like substance started oozing through the edges of the door. The substance turned into a wave and filled the whole restaurant. I was smashed into a wall near the freezer for a full minute. When the clock struck 5:01, the substance retreated back into the freezer and everything was silent. The restaurant was dripping in a green goo, and I opened the freezer door to see Zim with his skin as clear as ever. Are you okay? I asked Zim, who looked a bit shocked. Before he could answer, the shift manager ran over and pushed me out of the way. You're fired! He yelled at Zim. Zim removed his work hat and exited the restaurant with me. That could have been worse, I said humorously as we walked back to Zim's house. I thought it went rather well, but perhaps fast food is not the right career for Zim. I agree. You'd be much better as Alpha of Earth. Almighty Alpha Zim has an incredible sound to it. Zim smiled. I began to enjoy seeing him smile more than anything else in the world. What could be wrong with me? I never care how another person is feeling. Dib was close, but nothing like this. All I want is for Zim to be happy and safe, whether we're taking over the world or not. How was the human wolf child's day digging in the dirt? Zim asked. Wonderful, I said excitedly. Within first minute I sniffed out and found entire skeleton. Zim started laughing. Stupid dead human! Chapter 7. Look Up. I was up in the house playing with Gur. He was doodling on the floor and singing doo-dee-doo-dee-doo. It was quite adorable. Zim was down in the observatory looking at the other Irken invaders and their assigned planets through his giant telescope. I could hear Zim call Gur on his little speaker. Gur, come to the observatory. Gur went down to meet Zim and I stayed up in the house. I relaxed on the couch until Zim and Gur came up in their disguises. Liz, there's something wrong and my telescope is broken. We need to go find another telescope to find out exactly what's going on. I leaped off the couch. We going for a walk? Yes, we're going for a walk. Zim rolled his eyes. We made our way to a hill overlooking the city. What about that one? Gur pointed to a telescope outside of Dib's house. Zim put on his alien binocular things to take a look. It certainly looks powerful enough, but it belongs to the Dib human. So, he seems nice, Gur said cheerfully. He is, as long as you're not supernatural, I confirmed. We want to destroy these people, not ask them for help. But you letting me help? I tilted my head questioningly at Zim. Purely strategic, Zim exclaimed with a hand in the air. You're a useful ally who wants to destroy the humans with me. The earth started shaking, knocking Zim on all fours. I nudged his face. "Welcome to my level, Alpha." The three of us went down to Dib's house. Zim and I walked up to the door, and he hesitantly rang the doorbell. Dib opened the door a crack. Zim slammed the door the rest of the way open, knocking Dib off his feet and entering the house. "I need to use your telescope." Dib grabbed a lamp of Professor Membrane and pointed it at Zim. "Gaz, there's an alien in the house." From another room, Gaz responded. "You mean besides you?" "We don't have time for this, Dib," Zim stated. "Your world might be in very great danger." "Well, yeah, you're trying to destroy the human race, remember?" "Dib, this is bigger than that," I pleaded. "We need your help." "I trust you, Liz, but I can never trust him." Dib pointed the lamp at Zim's face. "I need to use your telescope," Zim demanded. "You think I'm stupid? I mean, what kind of weak alien needs the help from the people he intends to conquer?" I stepped between the two boys, rose to 2 feet, and grabbed Dib by the shirt. "Dib, stop being such stubborn, xenophobic jerk and let us use your damn telescope!" "You know you're welcome to my telescope and much more, Liz." Dib stepped out of my grasp. "But I will never let Zim anywhere near my equipment." "Have you seen the sky?" Zim pointed out the door. "I'm not going out there, Zim." Dib stepped past me and closer to Zim. "I'm not falling for whatever it is you're up to. I'm already devastated you brought my only friend into this, but you're not getting me in on it." Dib poked Zim in the face with the lamp, and Zim ran out the door. Dib turned to me and stood with a proud grin. "Earth is safe once more." "Or maybe you just prevent from being saved?" I scowled at Dib back on all fours. "You'll thank me for protecting the Earth someday, Liz. You'll all thank me." Dib raised a fist in the air. As I walked towards the door, I donkey-kicked Dib in the back of the knees so he fell to the ground. Back outside, Zim was saying that the only option was to take the cruiser to investigate. We went back to the base, and I started to climb in beside Zim and Gur, but Zim held up his hand to stop me. "No, Liz, you can't come. It's too dangerous, and I need you to keep an eye on things down here." "But—" "Sit! Stay!" Zim commanded, and I did so in the cruiser hangar. "I'll keep you updated with the watch." Zim closed the ship and flew towards the night sky. As I watched Zim fly off and become a speck, I whispered, "Good luck." I stayed in the hangar looking out the window until Zim communicated to me minutes later. "Liz! Liz! Answer me, Liz!" I turned the watch on and barked. "Liz, I know what's happening. My theory was correct. Earth has been stolen by the planet jackers." "The what?" "It's an alien race that lives in the solar system of a dying sun. They steal planets and throw them in to keep it burning like firewood." "This is just like when neighboring wolf pack tried to fight our pack for territory," I remembered from my childhood. "I found an opening in the shell they're holding the Earth in, and I'm going to go through and deal with them," Zim was telling me. "But before I do, has there been any changes on the ground?" "No change, Alpha. Still same pulsing sky." "Good. I'll keep the communicator on so that we can contact each other at a second's notice." Zim went away from his watch, but left it on so I could see and hear everything. I left the base and ran back to Dib's house. I howled on Dib's porch and he opened the door. "What is it now?" I ran inside. "Just me now. Please, for love of Romulus and Remus, let me use your telescope." Zim could have put you up to this, but Liz is always welcome to use my telescope. Dib smiled at me, but with a hint of suspicion. I could hear Zim talking to the planet jackers through the device. Dib hissed while pulling at his hair. "Will you please tell me what's going on?" "According to Zim, Earth been stolen by other alien race called planet jackers. They throw Earth into their own sun to use as firewood, and Zim trying to stop them." "Why would he want to save the Earth?" "Is that the Dib?" Zim screeched over the communicator. "I try and let me use telescope." "Oh, it doesn't matter. We're almost to the planet jacker star, and I'm going to stop them before it's too late." Dib stood amazed and dumbfounded. "So this is all real?" "That's what we've been trying to tell you, Dib." "Okay, I'm sorry." Dib lowered his eyes momentarily. What are we waiting for? Let's go use the telescope. Dib and I ran down to the lab where the base of the telescope was. I could hear Zim fighting over the communicator. I looked through the telescope and saw that the sky was in squares. It's true, I told Dib. Look like picture box screen. Dib looked through the telescope. Hey, you're right. Alpha to Wolf Pup, coming Wolf Pup, my wrist shouted. This is Wolf Pup, what going on, Alpha? I answered Zim. I'm cutting through the enclosure myself. If you see a beam going across the sky, that's what that is. I have to go back and distract the planet jackers. Any other changes on Earth, Wolf Pup? No changes, Alpha. Just less quakes. That's because we're almost going in a straight line now. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must save the Earth so that I can destroy it. Look, cried Dib. There's a panel that's all black and broken. I looked and saw the broken glass. Zim must have crashed into it earlier. Broken glass almost shape of cruiser. A bright light went flying across the sky. There it is! There's Cuddy thingy Zim was talking about. Why are you on his side? I heard Dib's tone shift to almost serious. I looked at him and he was staring down at me with a sense of concern in his eyes. Why are you not? What do you mean? He's an alien trying to destroy mankind. Same mankind that taunt and alienate you and me? You not even avoid humans by choice like I do. Yet you defend them, even when they want nothing to do with you? Dib shifted his eyes away from me. Before he came along, you and I were best friends. Nothing could separate us. We'd sit together at lunch every day, and almost every night we'd watch Mysterious Mysteries together. You were the only one that would ever listen to anything I said. Now you spend all your time with him, planning to take over the world. Dib, There was a sudden quake that was more massive than before. I looked through the scope to see the fake sky shifting away to reveal a large orange star. He did it! He did it! I jumped into Dib's arms and started joyously dancing and howling. Shut up down there! Gaz's voice traveled down the stairs to us. Liz! Liz! It's finished! The Earth is safe! My wrist buzzed. You did it, Alpha! Dib and I ran back upstairs and outside to see the whole sky for ourselves. See? I elbowed Dib on 2 feet. He's not such bad little alien, is he? Dib rolled his eyes. Chapter 8. Boom. I hunted down and brought back a pair of live chickens for Zim to experiment on. I also caught a 3rd chicken for my own little chicken meal. We were both down below and Zim was launching the hens into space while I gnawed on the bones that remained of my chicken food. Zim was about to launch the 2nd chicken when an alarm suddenly went off. Zim and I both raised our heads from what we were doing. Security breach! Unknown intruder! Zim slipped on his disguise and we both went up to the house to see what was going on. I was still carrying a chicken bone in my mouth when Zim opened the door to reveal a poor squirrel costume made of clay that was shifting around the front yard. Zim was staring at the squirrel and I could see the eyes in the squirrel chest. I recognized them as Dib's eyes. Gnomes, capture the squirrel, Zim commanded. The gnomes picked up the clay swirl and dropped it, shattering the squirrel and revealing the Dib. Ha! Nice try, Squirrel Dib. I laugh at your pitiful attempt at spying. Here I go. Zim started laughing and I approached Dib on all 4s. Go on, laugh, Dib shouted past me. But one day you'll be sitting in your house all safe and secure, and then you'll look over and I'll be there, doing stuff. I tilted my head up at Dib questioningly. Stuff? In my home? Never, Zim shouted. You'd have to find some kind of flaw in my security net. Since that could never possibly happen, you'll have to do your stuff elsewhere. I sat on the ground between the 2 boys, looking back and forth between each of them. You haven't discovered some kind of flaw, have you? Zim questioned Dib. Let's just say your home defenses could use some tightening, Dib told him before turning and leaving. You're lying! Nothing breaks through my defenses! Nothing! At that moment, the pizza delivery boy pulled up front and walked right onto the property. He rang the doorbell and Gurr answered and took the pizza from him. Gurr, we send humans away from our home, not invite them over. I had a coupon, and you let Liz over all the time. I dropped my bone. I hardly human. I looked back after Dib. Want me to see if I get security flaw from Dib? No. Zim swatted at the air. Wait, I have an idea. How about you try to find out from the Dib what the flaw is in my security system? Zim pointed at me. But I sighed in defeat. Fine. I turned and ran after Dib. I let out a couple of barks as I was catching up to him. Dib! Dib! Wait up! Dib turned and saw me. Liz? I was now caught up to Dib and walking by his side on all fours. I thought you were convincing, Squirrel. Really? Thanks. I made it myself, Dib said proudly. You did? No, not really. Dib lowered his head. It's too bad you not get through weak point in security system you mentioned. Yeah, that spot by the... Dib stopped himself. Hey, wait a minute. Did Zim put you up to this? What Dib talking about? I looked up at him curiously. He sent you over here to try and find out the weakness in his security system, didn't he? Dib accused. I shook my head in disappointment at my old pal. Dib, come on, you know you can trust me. Dib turned away and his trench coat created a quick breeze. You know, I'm not so sure lately. What? Just because I friend with Alien? I not have friends besides you? Dib turned back towards me. Of course you can, Liz. Just not with him. I really not see what you have against him, Dib. He's an alien trying to take over the Earth. Why do you keep taking his side? You've changed, Liz. I not changed one bit, I barked. I had grudge against humans long before Zim. Zim my ultimate ticket to mass destruction of human race. Dib's voice got low and cracked. I'm a member of the human race? Do you want to destroy me? I was a bit surprised by this question. I thought it was obvious Dib Membrane was my only exception to my opinion of the humans. I rose to 2 feet and stepped closer to Dib. With my knees heavily bent, Dib was still a forehead taller than me. I used my index and middle finger like scissors to hold the base of Dib's cowlick and traced it all the way to the tip. Dib, I never really saw you as member of human race, I told him. I only see you as friend. When Zim and I take over world, I make sure your death not happen. Gee, thanks, Dib said sarcastically. I lowered back down to fours. My wrist started buzzing. Wolf Liz, come back to the base. I need you for something, Zim commanded. Her name is Liz Wolf, Dib told my wrist, not Wolf Liz. Be right there, Alpha, I said into the watch without breaking eye contact with Dib. See you at school, Dib. I turned and ran back to the house. When I reached the house, Zim was standing in the open doorway with a large pimple on the side of his face. The pimple had a drawing of a face on it that made it sort of hypnotic, but I tried not to stare out of politeness, and to focus on whatever it was Zim wanted. I hear. What you need, Alpha? Did you get the information from the Dib child? No. I looked at the ground in shame. I'm sorry, but he knew right away we'd try and trick him. He not trust me like he used to. Stupid humans can't do anything right, Zim grumbled. Come inside, I need to test something with you. Uh-oh. I stepped inside and sat on the ground. Zim turned to me and started bouncing the pimple up and down. I couldn't help but to focus on the eyes of the pimple and lost all sense of anything else that was going on. It was just that little pimple, and nothing else mattered in the world. Liz, I heard a voice echo in the distance. Liz, I want you to go downstairs and clean up all those chicken bones. I go clean up chicken bones, I responded to the voice. I went down and cleaned up the chicken bones before returning to the house. Zim was turned so that the zit was not in my vision and I was back to normal.
Fascinating. With these powers, I'll be unstoppable.
What just happened? I asked, dazed. It would appear this pimple has some sort of hypnotic powers. I first discovered it was making Gur obedient and wanted to test it on someone a bit more strong-willed. That's why I called you back here, Liz. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or mad at Zim. He just used me as a test subject, but he also said I was strong-willed, at least in comparison to Gur, and I know that's not saying much. What you do now? I asked him. I'm going to use it to hypnotize Dib into telling me what he knows about my security system. But first, I need to disguise it. We went down and found some dog-like clothes for the pimple. I will call it Pastulio. Why that name? I asked. You dare question Zim? Back at school, we were outside behind a tree. I made sure I was standing to the side of Zim where Pastulio couldn't hypnotize me. I certainly didn't need to be hypnotized to help Zim. We approached Peony playing hopscotch. Have you met my friend Pastulio? Zim asked Peony. He's visiting from another place. Peony took a look at the zit and screamed. Ew, he's... She looked into the eyes of Pastulio and was soon under the spell. Beautiful, I love him. We then approached Mary, who was jumping rope. You, frolicking dirt child! I burst out laughing at Zim's comment, and they stared at me until I finished. Meet Pastulio. Get away from me, you object of my unsurpassed worship. Now with 2 followers, we headed for the monkey bars, with many children playing. Pastulio demands your attention! Zim shouted to the children before bouncing the zit in that hypnotic way. The children all became hypnotized and fell to the ground as we walked towards the school entrance where Gaz was reading a book. I knew that hypnotizing her would be no easy task. We would require a man dressed in a large pig costume carrying a pizza to bring out her weakness. Dib was trying to hide behind the steps, but I could see his cowlick sticking up. I wasn't about to give him away, of course. I knew he'd follow. Zim addressed the crowd of followers. You will tell Pastulio everything that Pastulio wishes to know. I am Pastulio's official spokesman. Whatever information you give to me will please Pastulio. Zim noticed Gaz sitting there and tried to hypnotize her. Stare deeply into Pastulio. He is your master. He is... Go away, Gaz said simply. Zim was a bit surprised. Are you sure you don't want to look at Pastulio? Zim tried to draw Gaz's attention to the zit. Gaz only growled and pushed Zim away. Zim finally accepted that he wasn't getting anywhere with her, and we all went to the classroom. While in the classroom, Dib burst through the door and jumped on the vacant desk of Miss Bitters. Don't look at that thing on his face, he told the class. He's using it to control you. Pastulio rocks, came from the back of the room. There is no Pastulio, Dib shouted. It's just a pimple, a hypnotic pimple. Zim and I stepped forward. I was dragging myself on 2 feet. Look, cried Zim, at Pastulio. Never, Dib resisted. I'll never surrender my free will. Smacky, hold him, Zim commanded Torque, and Torque tackled Dib. Torque held Dib in front of Zim, but Dib was still resisting. You can't make me look. I'll just shut my eyes. Dib turned his head and closed his eyes. Oh, you'll open them, said Zim. You have to breathe sometime. No, Wait, what do my eyes have to do with breathing? Dib opened his eyes and looked towards Zim and Pastulio. Dib began to fall under the spell. I will tell Pastulio everything. He suddenly snapped out of it, but it didn't last long. He went back and forth between being controlled and trying to stay free. Every time Dib resisted, his eyes went to me. At one point he begged for my help. Liz, you've still got free will, help me! I stood there silently watching him. You promised you wouldn't let Zim destroy me. I not let him destroy Dib, I told him.
We just want little information on Zim's security system.
Never! I'll never tell! Eventually, Dib fell completely under the spell and told Zim there was a blind spot in his gnome field. As soon as he did, the zit on Zim's face began to grow until it took up the whole room. I backed all the way to the window of the classroom and jumped out.
That's just like Magnete's molting,
I shouted as the zit burst and pale green pus was bursting through the windows and washing everything away. In the end, Dib had to clean up the mess with a tiny sponge. To make up for letting Zim capture and hypnotize him, I helped Dib out with the cleaning. Chapter 9 Pigs Ahoy! Today was a Dib day for me. I was spending the day hanging out at Dib's house like the old days. We were both in Dib's room. I was sitting on the edge of his bed, watching and listening to Dib pace back and forth while ranting about something paranormal. I think that new guy down the street could be a vampire. Think about it. He never comes outside until sundown. He's always dressed in black. He doesn't even have any mirrors in his car. Gaz always dressed black, I responded to Dib. I'm just saying it's all pretty suspicious if you ask me. Dib paused from his pacing. Hey Liz, do you want to go spy on this guy and see what he's all about? I not know. I just sort of looked to the side. Come on, I thought you loved going on paranormal investigations. Remember when we investigated that haunted barn? I looked back up at Dib and smiled at the old memory. We accidentally scared old Woodchipper, and we'd taken home by police. I laughed. Yeah, so what's the problem now? Dib sat next to me on the bed. What you do if you catch vampire? What do you mean? I'll get my proof and send it into Mysterious Mysteries, of course. I mean, I looked down at my front paws. Would you have him killed like you would Zim? Dib threw his head back, now knowing what I was on about. Are you serious? This is about Zim? Dib stood up and turned away from me. Man, I can't even talk to you without him being brought up anymore. Dib started to head for the door. You know what? Whatever. I'm going down for a snack. I sighed before going downstairs as well. I found Dib and Gaz in the living room and Dib was yelling at Gaz for eating all the cereal. You think you own all the cereal. Gaz scowled at him. Well, you know what, Dib? You don't. You just don't. I looked over at Dib from the door. Look, all I'm saying is if you're gonna... What was I saying? Gaz? Have I always sounded this funny? As long as I've known you. And have I always had this claw for a hand? Yeah, I said, trotting over. You told me you were in tricycle accident when you were 3. You have your hand replaced. Does Dib remember? Huh. Now that you mention it, I do. An ad for Bloaty's Pizza Hog came on the TV, and Dib stared angrily at it. The pig. It haunts me. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I grabbed Dib's claw hand. Come on, want to spy on Zim or something? Now that sounds more like the Liz I know. Dib ran to get a couple of his dad's cloaking jackets. When he came back, he was explaining it to me and Gaz shushed him. Whatever. I'm gonna sneak up past those giant lawn gnomes and leave a nasty message note. Leave a nasty note on his door. Dib bent over and started breathing heavier than usual. I've always had these tubes in my neck. You had hover helmet accident when you were 6, only 2 years before we met. Remember? Have my plans always been this lame? Gaz pointed at Dib. Oh, yeah. And these visions of pigs in my head. What's with these pigs? Dib, come on. I stepped over and grabbed Dib's sleeve in my mouth, leading him to the door. We go leave nasty note by Zim. That make you feel better. Yeah, okay. Dib surrendered. I carefully led Dib down the street as I always do. The poor boy can hardly walk anywhere without me. Don't know how he survived 2 years like this without a trusty canine companion like myself. We made it to the front of Zim's house, where we saw Zim's little robot come out with a rubber pig. Dib screamed at the robot and pig's appearance. The robot screamed back and ran into the house, leaving the pig on the ground. Dib, stay calm. I released his sleeve and nudged his hand gently. Remember, stress not good for your poor little heart. Dib crawled over to the door and started banging on it and yelling at Zim. I know you're behind the piggies, Zim. I don't know how, but I know that it's you. Rubber piggies have ruined my life, and it's all been you. I approached Dib and tried to lift him off the ground with my head. Dib, let's just leave note and go. You're not in any shape for this thing. Dib only shoved me back, and I was surprised. He'd never dismissed me like that before. He was really serious about something, but I didn't understand what. I stepped back to the first row of gnomes and just watched my only friend. Dib started punching the house with his massive cyborg fist. You will pay for ruining my childhood, Zim! You will pay! I gulped. I hated it when his temper got like this. I know he'd never harm me, but sometimes his mass is just too much for me. I stick around because he protects me from humans that aren't so nice to feral freaks like me. With one massive punch, Dib knocked in the front wall of Zim's house. I remained in the gnome field, knowing not to get in his way. My whole life has been a miserable pig-filled ordeal because of you! Dib punched around the walls of the house. You can hide, Zim, but you can't hide! The poor little robot looked up at Dib's exoskeleton and rockets. Prepare for your destruction! Dib launched about a dozen rockets and the small robot screamed and ran down the toilet. Dib was getting through the house and into the lower parts of the base. Zim's demise was unavoidable at this point. I've seen the Dibborg destroy before, and he's quite the unstoppable force. Dib finally made it to the part of the base that Zim was in, and I watched from the hole in the floor that he had made. And now, Zim, this is for tampering with the past. This is for the pigs. The robot arm drew back and was ready to strike. Zim threw a rubber pig into some sort of vertical whirlpool as the hand came down. Enjoy your last moments of privacy. Soon the world will see. Wait a minute. Have I always been like this? Been like what? Alien-obsessed boy with impossible hair? Yeah, that you. I told my old friend on the porch of my more recent friend. Yes, Dib cried. I have, haven't I? Life! Good old Dib like Dib! The gnomes grabbed Dib's legs and dragged him off the property. Zim had programmed the gnomes to ignore me because I'm not an intruder. Back on the sidewalk. Dib, you act weird for yourself. You feel okay? I've never felt better, Liz. Dib and I started walking back to his house. He was full of excitement and energy. I've never felt so alive. In fact, Dib started to reach into the pocket of his trench coat, but we were interrupted. Wolfie! I heard Gurr scream my name from the house. I took a few steps towards the house. Yes, Taco Pop, what is it? The master needs your help! Meow! He shouted before running back into the house. I looked at Dib and shrugged. Sorry, Dib. Looked like I needed. I ran back in the house, and Gurr led me down to a room where I found a vertical whirlpool, and Zim dumbly holding his own brain. After Gurr explained the whole thing to me in great, unnecessary detail, it was up to me to bring Zim back to normal. I found the Zim in the past right after trading his brain for a pig and put the brain in the whirlpool, which was more like a time blender. Zim was back to normal with a gasp of air. I am Zim! You certainly are, I smiled. Ah, the great wolf pup has rescued Zim! Zim grabbed me and held my head in a skull-crushing hug. Can't say I was complaining all that much. I'll take whatever form of affection I can from him. I smiled into his chest and wagged my tailbone. Chapter 10. Moose Business. Zim and I were down in the lab. He was watching monitors of our classmates bullying him. A few came up of them bullying the both of us. The clips transitioned entirely to Dib picking on Zim and trying to get information out of him. Most of them I broke up whatever fight there was, and I stood up for Zim when I was able to. The clips ended and Zim stared at the screen angrily.
What's Zim thinking?
I asked Zim. Zim didn't answer right away. He sat in his chair and I sat on the floor behind him. When he did answer, he didn't move at all.
Something must be done about these stink humans. They must pay for treating Zim so horribly. What you do?
I asked with concern for my old friend Dib. Zim turned in his chair towards me.
Begone, pup. I have important matters to attend to and will see you tomorrow at school. But leave,
Zim shouted. The next day at school, Zim almost immediately asked to use the restroom and spent 3 hours in there. Miss Bitters was saying something about cannibalism or something when Dib shot a hand in the air.
Yes, Dib.
Miss Bitters, Zim's trip to the restroom has lasted a real long time. I know that Bitters doesn't care much for Dib at all and only sees him as a nuisance like many others.
I recall you spending quite a long time in there recently as well.
That was corn and mayonnaise day, Dib argued.
Oh, that's no excuse.
He's up to something, I just know it, Dib said to himself and Bitters growled at him. At that moment, Zim slammed open the classroom door and let out a sigh of relief.
Ah, my business is done,
he announced before taking his seat. Dib stood there with his arms crossed, glaring at Dib. Who takes 3 hours to go to the bathroom before lunch, Zim? Zim was sitting back in his desk until Dib asked that question. Zim slammed his hand on the desk.
Nonsense! I had much to do. So much!
Zim still hadn't told me anything about this mysterious plan he had to take revenge on our classmates. This did seem to be a habit of his to keep his plans a secret until the last minute. As long as it didn't make me break my promise to keep Dib safe, I wasn't too worried. The loudspeaker suddenly came on and I heard the familiar voice of Gur.
Greetings, children of Earth! This is your new schoolmaster. A special surprise mandatory field trip is happening for the following lucky children. Morla, Blen, everyone in Miss Bitters' class except for Zim and Liz.
I suspiciously furrowed my brow at this news. Zim and Dib were staring at each other with fury.
And especially Dib.
Dib's eyes grew wide at the mention of his name.
All these children get to go to a special place made entirely of food. I like food. Now check this out!
Gur started beatboxing and I saw Zim take out a remote and press a button, shutting off the speakers. Miss Bitters was bitterly dismissing the other children. Dib rushed up and pointed at Zim. What about Zim and Liz? Why aren't they going? Zim played sad.
I guess we're just not smart enough, are we, Liz?
A big bully smacked Zim's head into the desk and called us both stupid, eh? Zim sat back up.
It hurts me to see all you dirty monsters go off to have so much fun. I guess Liz and I will just have to stay and study harder.
Dib told Miss Bitters to watch Zim closely, and she growled at him again before he and the others exited. I whispered to Zim,
You going to tell me what's going on yet?
Not quite, Zim whispered and grinned back at me. All in good time, my filthy wolf friend, all in good time. I looked out the class window and watched the kids file into a bus with Dib being the last. He rightfully looked around suspiciously before stepping on, with the door closing behind him. Now open up your textbooks and begin memorizing the copyright information, instructed Miss Bitters. You will be quizzed on this. Zim raised his hand. Miss Bitters, I have a mighty need to use the restroom once again. Okay, but that's your last restroom break for the rest of the school year. Zim saluted and headed for the door.
Zim, please tell me what this is all about,
I begged as Zim reached the doorway.
I will when I return. Do not question Zim!
And he exited. I looked at Miss Bitters for a moment and she glared at me. I surrendered and tried to focus on the textbook. But I couldn't focus. I was too worried about Dib and what Zim had planned for him. I didn't care about the other kids. They could all go get beaten up by a moose for all I cared. After Zim was gone for a good while and I realized me trying to study under these conditions was impossible, I decided to try and coax Bitters into dismissing everything. I crawled out of my desk and carried myself on all fours to her desk. I lifted myself so that my arms and head were on the front of her desk, looking up at her.
What do you want? Don't tell me you need to use the bathroom too. You know, Miss Bitters, it's obvious that this waste of time. I mean, look at class empty. Everyone on some glorious field trip. Zim got explosive diarrhea. You not want be here, and I not want be here. It clear nothing going get done around here today. What's your point, Liz? What you say we take day off. You can go home and do whatever you do on day off. Zim can enjoy toilet time without missing anything important, and I can, chase rabbits or something. What you say? Not gonna argue with you.
Miss Bitters stood from her chair and she flew out the door in that weird way of hers. I ran out the door on all fours to the nearby boys' washroom, I made sure the coast was clear before pushing the door open and sniffing around the room.
Zim, are you here?
I heard no response and saw no legs under any of the stalls. I sniffed my way closer to the 3 stalls. There was a strangely familiar smell coming from the middle stall, and I pushed the door open. The toilet didn't look too out of the ordinary, but there was definitely a different smell to it, and it wasn't what you'd expect from a toilet. I realized it smelled strongly of Gur and faintly of Zim. They were definitely in here, but where could they have gone? I decided to find out via the watch. Usually Zim is the first one to contact me through the watch, but I clicked the button and started calling for Zim.
Zim? Zim? Pick up, damn it.
Finally Zim answered and I saw his out-of-disguise face.
What do you want, Liz? I'm in the middle of executing my brilliant plan. That what I call you for, I shouted at him. Now tell me, what your stinking plan? Well, I was just about to explain it to the Dib child, but now that you're here, I guess you can both hear it. You see, as the Dib has already figured out, and I'm sure you have as well, this is a trap. You two are really the only ones who can appreciate the amazingness of this plan, so I'll let you both in on what it is. Liz, what are you doing?
I left the washroom and the school and was running all the way back to Zim's base on all fours.
Keep going, I listening,
I shouted down at the watch.
Very well. Anyway, Zim continued, look out the window, would you, Dib?
I could hear Dib screaming and Zim laughing in the background. I had no idea where the bus was, or where it was going, so my only chance to save Dib was to go straight to Zim and talk him into stopping this whole thing.
My mission might not be as exciting without you around to annoy me, Dib, but it will be more pleasant. Zim, please, I pleaded while running down the street. Where you send bus? Dib and his fellow busmates all smelled their fate the moment they stood in the way of my mission of doom. But you, destroying you, Dib, will be the greatest victory.
I ran around the final corner and saw Zim's little green house just a block away. I heard Dib's voice. No! Liz promised me that I'd be spared in your world domination. You can't do this, Zim. I was now on the property and running through the door. I figured destroying you would upset Liz, which is why I didn't let her in on this plan until it was too late to stop it. That is, Right now." Zim started laughing again. "You're not gonna get away with this, Zim," I heard Dib shout as I pounced into the room to find Zim talking on the monitor to Dib. "I already got away with it. See? Look out the window. I would say I'd gotten away with it pretty nicely." I muted the watch so that there was no sound coming from it, but Zim didn't think I'd hung up on him, eh? I started to sneak up behind him as Dib looked out the window of the bus to see outer space. "You're launching your enemies into space? That's your plan?" Dib saw me behind Zim and made eye contact with me for a moment, but didn't give me away. "This is crazy! Launching you into space is only—" I had jumped onto Zim and tried to get past him to the controls to turn that bus around. "No! Computer! Restrain the wolf child!" "Come on, Liz, take him! I knew you wouldn't let him get away with this!" A series of wires and claw hands started trying to capture me, but I fought with the fierceness of my inner wolf. With me being distracted, Zim continued. "As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, this is just the first part of my plan. Now is where the fun really starts. Liz, look out!" I heard Dib's voice shout a little too late. A mechanical hand had grabbed me and lifted me to the ceiling. I struggled, but was not strong enough for it. On the screen I saw some sort of shiny light open up in front of the bus. The bus drifted towards it, and Dib looked out the window at it. "A wormhole? Is that a wormhole?" I laughed. "They're not wormhole. I see wormholes in ground, and wormholes not look like that." A mechanical arm shut off my mouth and kept me silent. "Impressed yet?" Zim asked Dib. "Well, I mean, it's better than just launching us into space." The bus was then caught in the gravitational pull of the shiny knot wormhole. "The wormhole is only phase 2 of my scheme." "There's more?" Dib asked with worry in his voice and eyes. "So much more." Zim started tapping a few buttons, "I researched many different wormholes with many different possible outcomes. It was very difficult deciding which would be the most horrible for you. One wormhole would have spat you out into a dimension of pure itching." An image of some green substance came on the screen. "You can't really tell, but that stuff's really itchy." Another would have sent you to a dimension of pure dookie. An image came on the screen that I would prefer not to talk about. Dib and I both tried to look away from the horror. "But I chose this particular wormhole especially for the occasion." Dib and I were both sweaty with worry. "You see, at the end of this wormhole lies a room with a moose." Zim shouted the last part, and the image of a moose in a white room came on screen. I bit down on the computer arm as Dib screamed, "No! Wait a minute. Did you say a room with a moose?" "Yes. Your fear is overwhelming, no?" No." Dib stepped closer to the monitor. "What's so scary about a room with a stupid moose in it?" I finally managed to spit the computer arm out of my mouth so that I could correct and warn Dib. "Dib, not be fooled. Mooses very aggressive creatures. My pack lost Alpha to moose." Zim had been looking at me as I spoke, and now looked back at Dib. "The she-wolf speaks the truth. You should be in great fear of the mighty moose. Now, Dib, I leave you to your, Gur was whispering a suggestion to Zim. "Moosey fate! Say moosey fate!" "Your moosey fate." Gur giggled with glee and Zim started laughing maniacally, and then shut the monitor off. The computer arm finally released me, and I was dropped to the ground. On 2 feet I pounced at Zim and grabbed him by the collar, "Zim, you turn bus around this instant!" "Oh, I can't do that," Zim told me sadistically. "The bus is in the impossible to escape gravity of the wormhole. Even if I wanted to, we couldn't possibly save them now.
But Dib, my friend, I promise I not let anything happen to him.
You'll get over your loss, Liz. Zim turned and looked at the blank screen. With that stink human out of the way, you and I can finally focus on our main goal of taking over the world. He looked back at me and let his voice get calm and almost sympathetic. Isn't that what you wanted, Liz? To bring the wolves together and dominate the humans? Don't tell me you've forgotten that Dib is a human too. A human that wants to stop our plan. I was at Zim's side and grabbed his arm.
We don't have to kill Dib to dominate Earth. You can put him out of way, but not kill him. I not care about anybody else on planet, but please.
My eyes teared up for the first time since being separated from my pack.
No, let Dib die.
Zim's face grew with disappointment, and he turned his back to me again. It seems I was wrong about you, filthy wolf child. I thought you were going to dominate the world with me. But if the death of one puny human is going to affect you so much, I guess you're just not worthy of this job. I said nothing as a tear slid silently down my cheek. Zim continued to avoid looking my way. Get out, he finally whispered.
Zim.
Get out! He finally turned and shouted at me. Get out of my lair and off of my base before I decide to destroy you as well. I stood my ground, staring at him in disbelief for a moment. Zim stepped closer to me, filled with a rage that he's never directed at me before, I said get out! It was finally enough to make me leave. I didn't quite know where to go. I couldn't go home yet, knowing Dib's fate. I went to the membrane house and found Gaz watching TV. I didn't even bother howling or knocking or anything. I just walked in. Gaz was wondering where Dib was, but didn't seem all that concerned. I didn't have the heart to tell her, so I just left without saying a word. I went up to the hill that oversees the city, the place people go to stargaze and enjoy their levers. It was mostly empty tonight, and I looked up at the dimming sky. Stars were starting to come out, and I did something I'd never done before. I prayed. I don't know who or what I was praying to, but I prayed.
Please, 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 let Dib be safe. If anyone get out of this, he can. Please live, Dib, please live.
I lowered my head and buried my face in the grass. I inhaled the smell of the grass as I watered the dark green blades with my tears. I heard some sort of flying machine overhead after a minute of crying. It's just a jet, I thought. But then it was getting closer and louder. Jets never come this close to the ground here. I looked up and saw a school bus flying towards our school. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was imagining it, but the image didn't go away.
Dib!
I cried and jumped in the air before running down the hill towards the school. By the time I made it to the front of the school, and most of the kids had piled out of the bus and were complaining about the worst field trip ever. I looked around for Dib but didn't see him.
Dib?
I called out. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure standing in the door of the bus. I looked over and saw Dib grinning proudly.
Dib!
I ran to my old friend.
You alive! You made it!
I jumped to 2 feet and hugged my Dib friend.
I did it, Liz. I saved us all. I knew you could do. I knew you could.
Chapter 11. Snack time. Dib and I are absolutely pissed. Yes, pissed at Zim. I haven't gone to his house or sat with him at lunch all week. Dib gives him the same crap that he always does, and Zim returns his attitude. We were all in class, and Miss Bitters brought out a mysterious black package. The package sat in the back of the room where everyone's attention was directed. There was a timer on the package that was counting down. At exactly 0 seconds, Miss Bitters pushed a big red button on the package. The package started smoking and the main components blasted away. The smoke cleared to reveal a little cage with a hamster in it. The children all saw the hamster and collectively awed before gathering around the back table. I too rushed to take a peek at the rodent, but not for the same reason as the other kids. I put my front paws on the table and looked down into the cage with my tongue hanging out. "You look like a tasty snack," I said down to it with hunger. Miss Bitters hit me in the head with a rolled-up magazine. "No, Liz, this hamster is not for food. By order of the school board's program to reduce misery among school children, this class is issued one classroom pet, hamster class. Name, Peepee." Knowing that I wouldn't be able to resist the urge to take a bite out of Peepee, I backed away from the cage and stayed on 4s next to Dib. While other children were admiring the cuteness of the animal, Zim took one look at the creature and screamed. He tried to run away, but Dib and I stood in his way. Do I even have to say anything at this point? Dib asked nobody in particular. "If you are referring to my reaction to that hare monster," Zim told us bitterly, "I can assure you that like the other normal children, I find it, cute." Dib finished. "The word is cute. Humans think hamsters are cute." "Wolves think critters like that make yummy treat," I said with a grin as I eyed what would be food to my real family. Liz here is a bit of an exception to everything that humans are and do. Dib pet the top of my head the way I always liked. "Yes," Zim said while deep in thought. "This cuteness has a curious effect on human beings." Zim turned towards us. "Makes them weak." Zim went deeper into thought and then grinned. I had forgotten how glad it made me to see Zim smile like that. I wanted to see more of it. "Take a good look, children, except Liz or she'll eat it," Miss Bitters told us. "It will prepare you for your adult lives in our nightmarish corporate system." Zim went back over and stared at the hamster for a bit. Dib stared at Zim with suspicion, and I stared at Zim with a longing to make him happy again. The next day Miss Bitters was training us to stand on our heads for some reason. "I can do that too. See? Isn't that fun? Anyway," Dib put his hand up. "Miss Bitters, have you noticed anything strange about the hamster?" We all looked back at the pet. "He's 3 times his size and he has that hideous throbbing alien device on his back." "Yes, he's getting plenty juicy meat on those bones, right?" I started salivating again and licked my lips. I heard Zim whisper to himself in front of me, "The Earth Boy is trying to interfere. Now is the time to use that peepee creature's cuteness to divert attention." There was a sudden crash from the back of the room. Everyone looked to see the hamster was gone and replaced with a giant hole where he just was. There was a silence, and then many children and their desks started to collapse. There was another crash beneath the window by Dib. Zim rose from his seat. "This is a little ahead of schedule." Zim ducked through the hole in the wall, and I followed with Dib not far behind me. We saw Peepee about the size of a pup, running and eating the fence. After he ate, he grew to about the size of Zim. My tongue hung out of my mouth, with drool dripping. "He big enough to feed a whole pack now." I could only see the creature as food. The 3 of us went through the hole in the fence and watched Peepee wander down the street towards some buildings. "Yes, my creation, grow, grow!" And grow the animal did as he ate. "Now, Peepee, come to your master!" Zim tried to command it. I was sort of liking this idea of his, because I could easily protect Dib from this one. My only problem was I wished he'd used a giant wolf instead of a hamster. I could have been able to communicate with the wolf and tell it to specifically avoid Zim, Dib, me, Maybe Gaz and Professor Membrane. Peepee didn't come to Zim when called, and Zim grew impatient. Peepee was now bigger than most of the buildings in the area. Dib and I were now at Zim's side. "Anything you'd like to confess?" Dib asked and pointed at the monstrous rodent. "No," Zim told him. "Don't be silly." "I think this amazing idea, Zim," I told Zim. Zim and Dib both looked at me with surprise. "You do?" asked Zim. "I mean, of course you do. It is brilliant, isn't it?" I nodded. "I just wish you used Wolf instead." "Oh no," Dib groaned. "She's going back to his side." It didn't take long for Ultra Peepee to be all over the news. After using a building for a toothpick and taking down some jets, Zim tried again to make the creature obey him. "Come here! You must obey me! I am your lord and hamster master!" Zim moved to the center of the panicking crowd and tried to tell them to fear him instead of Peepee. Of course it didn't work. "Well," Zim put his hands on his hips, "he does seem to be destroying the humans, and that is good." Zim looked up at the towering hamster. Good job, Peepee. I'll just wait until you're all done here. Carry on." Dib had run off to warn the military or something, while Zim and I went back to the base to wait for Peepee to finish. Zim had quickly welcomed my companionship back that day, and I was grateful for that. The whole moose thing was behind us, and I was ready to take on the world with him once again. Zim and Gur were watching TV inside while I was outside, watching the destruction of this horrid city. I didn't feel as worried for Dib this time. I knew he would be smart and avoid crossing the hamster's path directly. Peepee was drawing closer to the base. There was a thunderous footstep that caused Zim to come outside to investigate. He looked up to see Peepee coming closer to the house. I saw that Zim was out of his disguise. "Zim, what are you doing out without disguise?" I ran over and tried to push him inside. "Someone see you!" Zim tried once again to make Peepee obey him, but with no results. He ran back inside and was soon in his cruiser to meet Peepee at eye level. Zim started swarming and shooting at Peepee, but it only made the overgrown snack angrier. "Never thought I'd see that." I heard Dib's voice just outside the property. I went to Dib's side. "Dib, you try and stop hamster!" Peepee breathed fire at Zim and his ship, which caused Zim to lose control. He crashed through many buildings and landed several blocks away. Dib and I wasted no time running to the site where we found the unconscious alien. "Zim!" I was at his side immediately, trying to lick and nudge him awake. Dib was behind me, talking to himself again. Zim soon sat up and looked around. I gave him a quick hug when I realized he was okay, and he brought out his communicator to contact Gur. Within seconds, Gur had flown in and Zim hopped on his little green back to take off. Dib finally noticed when I was back at his side. "Wait, Zim!" he shouted after Zim. "Promise me you're on our side this time." Zim turned Gur around and hovered in front of us. "I know not of sides, Earth Stink, but just this once I agree with you. The hamster must be stopped." I smiled up at Zim at this news. "No!" Dib screamed. "Oh, wait. Yeah, go on then." "I knew he'd make right decision," I said in an almost whisper as Zim flew off. Dib looked down at me. "What are we supposed to do now? I can't just sit here and do nothing." I looked back up at Dib. "Make sure he can do what he need do." Without saying a word, Dib and I both knew immediately what to do, and we headed for the city's fairgrounds, where we found the military ready to fend off Ultra Peepee. We both ran in front of the tanks. "Don't attack!" Dib shouted, and I barked for their attention. "The alien is trying to get rid of the hamster. Don't interrupt his plan." "Boy's crazy," one of the soldiers pointed. "Put him in one of those crazy buckets." Other soldiers came over and tackled Dib, and I jumped out of the way. "No, you must listen, you stupid humans!" "Put her in a bucket too!" And the soldiers started making their way over to me. But when they reached for me, I bit down on the nearest man's arm and I ran off. I ran until I found myself at the feet of Ultra Peepee. I looked up at the monstrous neck, and he looked down at me. No! I heard both Dib and Zim's voices scream as I stood frozen in horror. The rodent was the size of a mountain. No creature of Earth has ever been so large. Definitely no prey animal like this. At any other point in history, I, the wolf, would be the predator to him, the prey. This was different, though. This time, I was the prey, and Peepee was the predator. I saw the giant hamster paw reaching down for me. I was still frozen. Then the tanks started to fire on Peepee, and he was distracted. It was also enough to break me out of my spell, and I ran under his large feet. A rocket thing that Zim had planted launched, but missed Peepee. I was still at the hamster's feet, with him being distracted by the shots of the tanks. I jumped onto his non-mechanical foot as it stomped around. As I expected, he took no notice of me on his foot when he was being shot at. Like the pack taught me, the prey will focus on the more obvious threat. This put you back in your place of prey, Peepee, I cried before chomping down on one of his mighty toes. I held my bite as it grew deeper despite Peepee's screeching. Liz! I heard Zim's voice screaming down at me from above. Release your hold on the Peepee! I suddenly felt Peepee and I being lifted off the ground, and I tore away from his foot. I dropped almost 20 feet to the ground with a chunk of bloody, hairy hamster flesh in my mouth. I looked up at the sky to see Peepee flying away. I shook off the pain of the high drop and slowly rose to 4 paws, blood dripping from my mouth. I looked up to see Dib hopping over in his bucket, and Zim approaching while adjusting his wig. Both had immense worry on their faces as they looked down at me. Are you okay, Liz? Dib asked quickly. There was a strong pain in one of my back legs. If I was a creature that walked on 2 legs all the time, this injury might make it difficult for me to move. However, being on all 4s has its advantages. I slowly hobbled over to my 2 friends. Once I was right in front of them both, I lowered my head and opened my mouth. The chunk of giant hamster foot, that was the same size as Peepee had been originally, fell out of my mouth and onto the pavement. Directly between Zim and Dib it landed. Zim and Dib exchanged confused glances as I raised my head to my usual level and looked up at the 2. Rodents, always my prey, I whispered and looked directly into Zim's eyes. Next time, use giant wolf. With that, I collapsed to the ground. Chapter 12. Family Night. The injury to my leg has slowed me down some. I can't run at all or stand on 2 legs for more than a few seconds. It absolutely kills me that I can't run because I live to run on all 4s. Professor Membrane is working on some sort of cure thingy that will heal my leg completely. Other than that, things have pretty much gone back to normal between Zim, Dib, and me. I'm back to alternating between their houses and everything. Zim has decided to hold off on any world domination plans until I'm back on my feet. I guess he kind of feels responsible for me getting hurt. What a sweet little Irken. I was sitting in Dib's house. Gaz was trying to draw a pig on the floor while I was on the couch trying to stay active from the waist up. By staying active, I mean I was repeatedly throwing a ball in the air and catching it. Dib was all geared up and was talking to Gaz and me. This is it, you guys. Months of spying on Zim's freakish little household is about to pay off. I know every outer defense and just enough of the inner ones to actually make it down to the real base underneath. And once I get in there, Man, am I gonna do something. Gaz stabbed her writing utensil into the ground and dragged it across the floor with anger. I stopped playing with the ball and looked over at the frustrated Gaz. I'm trying to draw a little piggy. Can't you see I'm trying to draw a little piggy? Be quiet. Even I had to admit Gaz was a little scary sometimes. I knew better than Dib to never get in her way at the wrong time. Or any time. Dib was a bit too serious about Zim right now to care about Gaz's fury. Don't you care that Zim is trying to destroy all mankind, huh? I know Liz may not care, but you at least have to, Gaz. Forget it, Dib. You never will beat Zim, I told him. He way too advanced for you. Yeah, you've been no help during this whole invasion, Dib commented. If I had you 100% on my side instead of mostly on his side, that stupid little alien would be all over Mysterious Mysteries by now. That's how vital you are to this, Liz. So please, for the love of all that is alive in this world, help me. I lifted up my injured leg. Low, injury, kind of immobile here. Which was all Zim's fault, Dib argued. Whatever, you don't get it. Zim went into the other room and Professor Membrane floated over to Gaz on screen. Gaz, it's the annual family night out and it's your turn to pick where we eat. The time for choosing is now. I knew right away that she'd pick Bloaties, and I was right. That sounds fine, Membrane responded to her answer. I'll be home at 8. The screen floated over to me. As always, Liz is welcome to join us. Thanks, Professor, but I not think my leg like me going out and using. That reminds me. Membrane extended his pointer finger the way he always does when he's going to make an announcement. There's one of those scooter things in the garage that will aid you in getting around. I should have you cured by tomorrow. Really? Thanks, Professor. The professor is closer to being a human father figure to me than my actual human foster father. I only use their house for sleeping in, and as a formality. Dib called back from the other room. I'll be home in time for Mysterious Mysteries. Dib re-entered the living room. You know Dad's taking us out tonight, Gaz explained. I picked Bloaties. This is bigger than pizza, Gaz, Dib responded. This is the fate of all mankind. He headed for the door, and Gaz had another thing to say. You and your mankind. Uh-huh. Yeah, whatever. Look, if I'm not home in time, call this number and tell them the Mothman is caught in the spider's web. They'll know what you mean. He handed Gaz a card, but like I said, I'll probably be back before the Mysteries theme song starts. Dib opened the door and started heading out. See you later, Dibs, I called after him. Try not die. Thanks, Liz, he said before closing the door. I slid off the couch and crawled to the garage to look for the scooter. After about 15 minutes of searching, I found the scooter under some old junk. The scooter was one of those with a cushion to put your knee on, and you push with your other foot. I took it outside to get the hang of it on the sidewalk. After 2 hours of practice, Professor Membrane pulled up at 8. Ah, Liz, he addressed. I see you found that scooter. How is it working out for you? It definitely helped, but I need to get used to being upright. I said up to the professor. I'm glad to hear that, little feral girl. Let's go get the other 2. I forgot Dib was trying and probably failing to infiltrate Zim's lair. We went inside to see Gaz still drawing on the floor with Mysterious Mysteries now on TV. I'm home, announced Membrane. Are you ready to go? Gaz stood up from her drawing while chewing something. Where's your brother? He's out, Gaz stated with boredom. Let's go. No, Membrane shook his finger at Gaz. It's family night. That means everyone. If he doesn't get back soon, we'll have to put it off till next year. What about the rest of this year? Gaz asked angrily. Well... Professor called one of his people and asked about his schedule, but there was nothing else open. No good, honey. It has to be tonight, and I've got to finish up Liz's cure at 9:30. So if he's not home soon, we're going to have to cancel the whole thing. Membrane marched off to the other room, and Gaz started growling with shaking fists. Dib's voice suddenly came from Gaz's watch. Gaz! Come in, Gaz! Emergency! There you are, Gaz! And Liz is there too. Perfect! Looks like you'll have to tape the show for me. I made it in! Dib shouted with glee. It's incredible! There are things down here I never even dreamed of. I'm gonna try and blow it up now. No, you not! I growled into Gaz's wrist. Come home now, Dib, Gaz said impatiently. Your weird obsessions are not going to mess today up for me. I just want to go out and eat with Dad. That's all. Stop playing with Zim and get back here. You're breaking up. I can't hear you. There were explosions of some kind off screen. Zim! You're never gonna get away with it. Ah! Something was shot into Dib and Gaz ripped the device off in anger. You're coming with me to find my stupid brother. Gaz pointed at me. It's your stupid cure that Dad has to try and find, and Zim is your stupid friend. Not arguing with you. I put my hands up in surrender. Let's do this. I wheeled out of the house with Gaz. I led her down to the little greenhouse and started howling. Gur opened the door without his dog disguise. I'm guarding the house, he said, holding up a stuffed monkey. Gaz and I rolled inside and Gur closed the door. He sat back on the couch and watched the ad for bloaties. Gaz was watching it too, and she was filled with determination. Where's Dib? She finally asked. Gur jumped off the couch and brought out a series of weapons from his head. None may pass. You are an intruder. Where Dib? I repeated the question for Gaz. Gur put away his weapons and pointed to one of the elevators. You went down there. The two of them climbed and I rolled onto the platform that took us down below. Gur then led us to a large tube that I recognized as one of Zim's transporters of doom. You sure they took this one? Gaz asked the robot. Yes. Wait. He shrugged. Gaz and I tried to get into the transporter, but my scooter wouldn't fit. Gaz groaned in annoyance. I'll get him on my own. You just meet us at Bloaty's. I nodded and backed away from the transporter. After Gaz was gone, I looked at Gur, who looked up at me joyously. Guess what? He shouted. What? I asked him. Guess what? He shouted louder. What? Guess what? Wait, let me guess. I thought for a second. You have something to tell me. Gur opened his mouth in amazement. Yes! You guessed it! Gur started hugging my good leg and I giggled. Well, you must tell me, I asked him and he released my leg. I forgot. I shook my head and rolled my eyes with a smile. On my scooter, I rolled the few miles all the way to Bloaty's and waited outside. After about 5 minutes, I heard a crash towards the back of the restaurant. It could only be the part of the adventure I missed out on because of my stupid leg and scooter. Seconds later, Professor Membrane pulled up in his membrane mobile. I'm sorry, it just sounded like something Membrane would call his car. Here you are, Liz, the professor said as he walked up to me. Are the other two inside? I nodded. I think you find them there. We all found each other inside and sat at a booth. Dib was strapped on some sort of levitating table thing. Gaz sat next to her dad while I sat next to Dib. The professor was talking with one of his co-workers on the floating screen the whole time. I had him, Dib stated. I had him, Gaz. If you hadn't rescued me, I would have... We heard a bell ring, signifying that someone had entered the restaurant. We both looked up to see Zim steaming and adjusting his wig. He looked around until he found our table. There he is! Dib cried. Liz, unstrap me! Zim hopped onto the table across the way from us and hissed. Now, Dib, we finish this once and for... Ah! An animatronic pig got all up in Zim's face and spooked him. Zim fell to the floor and stared up in fear. I could feel him, because when I first came to civilization, I was afraid of the mocking metal creatures as well. The monsters all surrounded Zim and sweat dripped from his face. I dropped from the booth and slid between Zim and the animatronics in front of him. I nudged him to his feet and pushed him towards the door with my head. Go on, Zim, I told him. They not leave alone unless you leave building. Now go! Zim screamed and ran out the door, and I climbed back into my seat. There, see? Gaz said to Dib. You won. Eat your pizza. Dib struggled to get his arms out of the straps, but couldn't. I can't. Gaz then threw a pizza in his face, and I broke the straps with my teeth. At the end of the night, Membrane told me to stop by the house early in the morning. I rolled to the house at 9 o'clock that morning, where he gave me a shot in the leg. Within 10 minutes, I was back to normal, and I ran on all fours from the Membrane house to the digging site I went to for career day, and then back to Zim's house. I had so much built-up energy to let out that day, and couldn't wait to get back on my feet. Sometimes it's nice being friends with the son of the smartest human in the world. Chapter 13. Too Tired. I definitely wasn't taking my legs for granted anymore since I've been healed. Whenever I get the chance, I run to where I'm going. I finally started to figure out what my problem is with me and my emotions involving Zim. The reasons for me wanting to spend so much time with him, and wanting to always see him happy. My problem is that I'm reaching an age where I'm starting to search for a potential mate. Something that I'd never been focused on before. Gaz once accused me of being Dib's little girlfriend, but I laugh at that idea. I see him almost as much of a brother as she does. I could never choose him as my mate. He's also a bit too much on the human side of things. My first choice would have been an actual wolf, but obviously that's not an option for a number of reasons. My need to find a mate has forced me to settle on someone a bit between man and, well, beast. Ergo, I have a crush on the Irken. Miss Bitters was having one of the students build a tower of cards on Dib's desk to represent something boring that I didn't quite understand or give a dead rat about. Dib's desk was the last real desk in the class. I was reduced to a large tire that I occasionally chewed on, while Zim was using an old garbage can. When the tower of cards was finished, Bitters was saying how it represented some poor society and all that. Then the cards all collapsed on Dib's desk, which then collapsed under the weight of the cards. "Dib," Bitters said, irritated. "The warranty on your desk is worn out. Get a replacement from the pile." "Yes, ma'am," Dib said with absolutely no enthusiasm before heading to the back of the class and selecting a trash can. "Well, children, as you know, the desk budget for this year has run out," Miss Bitters was saying, "but the school board is giving you a chance to lessen your misery." Dib dragged his garbage desk to the front of the room, and a rat jumped out at his face. As soon as I heard, smelled, and saw the rat, I was out of my desk. With no hesitation, I chased and barked at the rat until it was off of Dib and out the classroom door. I would have continued to pursue it, but Bitters stopped me at the door. "Elizabeth, I'm getting sick of you disrupting the class with your miserable dog antics. Get back to your seat and stay there, or I'm gonna have to call your therapist again." "That not needed, ma'am," I said with my head and eyes as low as they could get. I made my way back to my seat and silently gnawed on my tire desk. Miss Bitters pulled down the projection screen and played a video, but I wasn't paying attention. I couldn't. I was too focused on being yelled at. Then my thoughts went back to my new class time daydreams involving Zim. I imagined us playing fetch in the park, and then I'd suddenly run to him and pounce on him. I'd lick his face and he'd yell at me at first, but then it would turn into laughter. Then Gur would come over and join the pile with his little adorableness. The human in a dog costume on the video said something about a secret prize, and Zim became demanding of the knowledge. "Secret?" He jumped on the desk and tried to get in the dog's face. I grinned to myself because I was starting to find his need for power and control to be a bit adorable. Ooh, I guess Liz is a sub, is that right? "What are you hiding, dog man? Tell me, tell me!" But the video ended without giving Zim any sort of answer. "Secret? Yes, of course. But what could it be? What? I must possess the secret prize!" Miss Bitters growled at Zim. "Miss Bitters," Dib asked, "why don't they use the money they spend on candy and prizes and use it to buy desks?" "That answer wasn't in the video," was all Bitters said as she held Zim up by the back of the collar. Once we all had our candy, Zim, Gur, and I were all walking together to try and sell the candy. Zim kept saying that he needs to sell so many boxes so that he can win the secret prize. I told him, "All funds I raise go to you if want them." "Really?" Zim questioned. "But don't you want to try to get the secret prize for yourself?" Watching him get the secret prize and making him happy would be enough of my own prize. Not nearly as much as you clearly do. Besides, chocolate poisoned my family, so I'm not most excited about trying to profit from it. Very well, Zim said as we walked past Dib. Hey, Zim! Dib shouted as to us while holding up an empty poop box. I sold a whole box at my dad's lab. Beat that! So you're trying to beat me to the prize, is that it? Zim said while removing a single candy bar. Just more proof of its strategic value. Dib snatched the bar away from Zim and I started growling lowly. Rrr. The only reason I'm selling this dirt in a wrapper is to watch you fail at something else, Zim. Dib started laughing to himself as sweat dripped down his face. The day and the sun were painfully hot. When I left my foster parents' house this morning, they had all the fans and air conditioning on. Dib continued laughing as he knocked Zim's box of candy all over the place and splashed his juice box in Zim's face. I wasn't standing for that. I let my own box slide off of my back before I started barking and chasing Dib down the street. Ah! Dib cried. It was a joke, Liz. Calm down. I slowed down to a walk as Dib kept running. Well, I'm not finding funny, Dib, I called after him. Just leave us alone. I trotted back over to Zim and helped him pick up all the candy before putting my own box on my back again. Zim walked up to an old woman's house while Gur stayed perched on the short walls surrounding her property. I sat at the head of the path leading to her door and watched Zim knock on the door. The old woman answered and I could see that she was holding a bat behind her back. Please, ma'am, Zim pleaded. If you don't buy my candy, my little brother will go insane. He gestured towards Gur, who started breakdancing. After a few cranks, his body dislocated from his head and launched into the air. Oh! The woman screamed. Good heavens! He's worse than I thought. Please, of course I'll buy some candy. Gur landed at their feet as the woman exchanged some money for a single candy bar. She took a couple of bites and started coughing sawdust all over the headless body of Gur. Mm-hmm. Zim nodded. That's the sawdust. The headless Gur sat up, and the woman kicked him away before crawling back into the house. Gur ran back and started banging on the door. I came over and picked him up in my mouth, dropping him back off at his head. We went to the next house over, and it was time to show Zim my method of selling. Zim and Gur both sat on the outside of the property, while I made my way to the porch. I slid the box, which was now starting to get moist from my back sweat, off of my back. I sat back and started howling until a woman answered the door with her baby. Buy some candy, will you? I begged innocently. She shook her head. No, thank you. And she started to close the door. Very well, I responded with a bit of a grin. Then I continue sit here and howl at your house until you buy candy bars. Please don't. But it was too late. I was already howling. The woman kept yelling at me to stop, and the infant was crying, but I continued. Okay. The woman finally surrendered. I'll buy some candy. Just stop howling. The woman took 2 candy bars from the box, and I quit howling. Thank you, I nodded politely. Much appreciated. I went back to Zim and handed him my money. Impressive. He grinned at me. We continued going from door to door. Zim's tactic usually failed, while my howling almost always succeeded. After several hot hours and only selling 9 bars total between the 2 of us, the 3 of us took a seat on the hot sidewalk. Gur was in one of the boxes, eating the candy bars. I can never figure out how such a little robot can eat so much, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. Gur, don't eat that filth! Zim finally yelled at him. It is the key to the mystery of the prize. He held up a single bar. The mystery of the prize. Gur did the same thing. I was so hot and exhausted from so much howling and walking around while carrying a box of poison. I laid my head on the sidewalk and closed my eyes to rest. I think Zim was talking to himself about not giving up or something when I heard a thud and a groan. I sat up to see that Zim had thrown Gur into Dib, who was now laying in the street. Gee, Zim, he said while throwing Gur off him and sitting up. I haven't even done anything to you yet. Get out of here, gangster of defeat! Zim yelled at him. Begone with you! Dib rose to his feet. Man, Zim, defeat's made you crazy. Dib walked away from the scene. What just happened? I asked my green companion, who ignored my question. Of course, he said instead. That has been my mistake all along. You get harassed by Dib? I've been trying to sell like a miserable human. This white wolves not sell anything, I told him. We just kill and eat and go sleep. Gur! Gur saluted Zim. Yes, my lord. I will use inferior human techniques no longer. Now watch as I unleash the full power of Irken persuasion. Yes, I said. I see Alpha in action. Yay! Gur cried. I'm gonna be sick! And he proceeded to vomit chocolate and sawdust on the front of Zim. I didn't want to because, it's chocolate and sawdust. But I licked up the mess off of Zim. Ooh, sexy. Great, Zim said. One companion makes the mess and the other cleans it up. We moved on with Zim's new method of selling. I hardly had to help him at all anymore. With his new method of selling, involved showing the potential buyer images of a post-apocalyptic world, and told them that this was their future if they didn't buy our candy. Needless to say, it worked every single time. When it was all over, Zim had sold over 1,200,000 candy bars. The money was an amount I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. In the classroom, all the money was shoved through the door, and we both tumbled down the mountain of cash. Dib sat there gawking at the amount of money. I am here, Dibworm, Zim said to Dib, and I have sold over 1.2 million revolting candy units. He walked up to Miss Bitters, and I went to my desk with a grin. I was excited to see how happy the mystery prize would make my Irken friend. I am prepared to receive the power of the mystery prize. Give to Zim! Well, Miss Bitters looked down at him while pulling out a yellow envelope. This has never happened before. Zim, your prize is... She tore open the envelope and read the paper inside. Your prize is nothing. There is no mystery prize. What? I barked. They just made it up to make kids work harder for no money. Eh? Zim looked up at her with confusion. As a consolation, here's some tuna. Miss Bitters handed Zim a can of tuna. Zim took the can and held it above his head. Curse you, poop dog! Curse you! His screaming had knocked over multiple desks and children, including my own desk. Now that could howl, I said, smirking to myself. Chapter 14. What a Loada. Zim and I were in the cafeteria. I spend every day eating with him now, and most nights at his house. I only go to Dib's house maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. Zim was having the usual trouble trying not to be disgusted by the earth food while I enjoyed my lunch. Dib was suddenly at Zim's side. Anyone who watches you obsessively every day would notice that you never actually eat any of the food. Why is that, Zim? Don't like the taste? Or is it something more? Dib held up a slice of bologna. In Zim's face. A weakness? Zim slapped the meat in Dib's hand away from him. Don't be ridiculous. I have already stuffed my normal human belly so full of delicious human filth that I could not eat another bite. Baloney! Dib threw the bologna at Zim's head and it started smoking and he screamed and ran off. I glared at Dib. Maybe if you're not such pest at Zim, he not be so set on destroying you, then Gaz and I not need save you all time. Are you even listening to yourself, Liz? Dib asked. If you wasn't so set on destroying me and everyone else, I wouldn't bother being such a pest to him. I told you I'd not let anything happen to you, Dib. That's not stopping him from actually trying to destroy me. I deepened my glare before going to Zim and licking at the area of the meat. It tasted amazing and I loved seeing him calm down from it. The next day, Dib was late to class because he was trying to catch a vampire gerbil. He saw Zim was still itching the blogna wound on his head. My licking had taken care of the burning, but not the fusion to the skin. "Are you still mad about that thing with the sandwich?" Dib asked him. Zim started making angry noises, and was about to get out of the desk when some other kids demonstrated exactly why Zim should be so mad at Dib.
"Hey, baloney boy! He's got baloney on his head!"
I jumped at the children that were taunting my green alpha and growled at them. I bit the first boy on the hand, almost as hard as I had bit Ultra Peepee. The boy screamed until I saw blood drip from his hand. I released him from my mouth and growled at him. "You leave him alone!" "That's enough, children." Miss Bitters broke it up. "That's it, Dib," Zim said to Dib. "Laugh now, yes. Laugh and frolic in your meats of evil. Meats of evil! But know that vengeance shall be mine. Oh, how it will be mine!" Dib made his way over to his desk, and I finally climbed back into my own. Zim was watching Dib closely, but, as usual, I didn't know his exact plan. Dib sat down and immediately yelled in pain. "Ow!" Zim started laughing in that maniacal yet amazing laugh of his. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as well, despite not knowing what the laughter was for. Dib looked down at his chair and picked up a tack. "This is your vengeance, Zim? A tack? That's pathetic, even for you." He sat back in his seat and Miss Bitters was ready to begin the class. I wrote in a note and passed it to Zim. "What did you do to tack?" He wrote back, "Oh, you'll see, my dear little Liz. I think you'll really like this plan. I came up with it especially for you." My heart raced as I clutched the note and looked at Dib to see if there was any change to him. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. At the end of the day, I was going to go home with Dib to see what was happening to him. But then Zim asked if I was coming over tonight and smiled down at me in that way that just makes me melt. I couldn't possibly say no. The next day, again, Dib was even later than usual. He showed up to class with scars all over him and his trench coat torn all over the place. As soon as he entered the room, a smell hit my nose that was absolutely phenomenal. "Late again, Dib," Bitters said with disgust. "And what is it this time, vampire babies or Bigfoot mailmen?" Dib was panting. "Dogs! Chasing me! So many dogs!" "I not blame them," I said while slightly rising from my seat and sniffing the air in Dib's direction.
"Hey,"
said the girl behind me.
"what's that nasty sandwichy smell?"
The children were all gagging except for me and Zim. "Dude," a kid from in the back of the room said. "Dude, I left my underwear on for a month once and it kind of smells like he does." I was now completely out of my seat, and my nose led me towards the Dib. "Who's the joke now, Dib?" Zim asked from his seat. "I told you you would suffer my revenge, and now look at you." I was at Dib's feet, sniffing away as he spoke. "What, you're mind-controlling slobbery dogs now? Apparently it's not just actual dogs either," he said, referring to me. "Real scary, space boy. A quick shower and your vengeance just washes right off." Other children were still gagging and saying how much he stunk, but I was in heaven. "Silence!" Miss Bitters shouted. "If I have to put up with your collective child stench every day, then so shall you all." Dib took his seat and I was forced to take mine as well, but I didn't notice anything else in the room but that delicious aroma coming from Dib. Miss Bitters said something about learning how to skin a moose, and then sniffed the air. She crawled about the class trying to find the source of the delightful stench. "Miss Bitters," said a boy from the back of the room, "I think there's a skinned moose somewhere in class." "I wish," I said dreamily. "Dib!" Miss Bitters floated over to Dib. "You stink. Go to the bathroom and roll around in the toilet until you smell better." "But I'll smell like the toilet," Dib argued. "Exactly. But Willie was the last one to use it." "Now!" Miss Bitters commanded, and Dib headed for the door. The other children were cheering except for me and Zim. Dib left the room and I was finally brought out of my trance. "Huh? What? Where am I?" Miss Bitters continued the lesson on skinning a moose. I had to admit this was way better than the usual stuff we're taught. I could get my revenge on the mooses for the one that killed my pack's alpha. Zim started waving his arms, and Bitters looked at him. Zim, is it a fair fight? Zim was asking. Is this moose creature wielding any sort of projectile weapons? He has very strong antlers, Zim, I told him, and never let moose kick you or you dead. The classroom door slammed open and I was hypnotized once again. Dib stood there fuming while I started to rise from my seat again. I know what you've done, Zim, he shouted, and it's not funny. But it's amazing. I was trembling. I don't know what you're talking about, Zim said. Get away from me, sandwich boy. Dib suddenly launched himself at Zim and pinned him to the ground right next to my desk. I practically fell out of my desk and was sniffing Dib with my tongue and dribble hanging out. The cure! Make it stop, Zim! Make this thing you've done to me stop! Zim slapped Dib off of him and shot up. There is no cure, and I'll never make it stop. You might as well resign yourself to your meaty fate. Once you do, I'll watch as the only friend you have succumbs to her primal wolf urges and eventually feasts on baloney you. I told you would forever rue the day you ever messed with Zim. Now begin your ruin. I'll just sit here and watch. I couldn't take it anymore. Dib smelled too good. I lifted my front paws and placed them on Dib's chest. I was licking at his delicious face. I started at his neck and chin and moved to behind his ear where it was nice and juicy. Dib was trembling and laughing as I licked and nibbled around his ear. Liz! it tickles! Liz! It tickles! I felt him put his hands on my shoulders and try to push me off, but he didn't try very hard at all. He finally gave up and dropped his arms with a pleasing sigh. Hey, maybe this isn't so bad after all. Dib left the class with me trailing behind him. When we got outside, other dogs started to join us as he talked to himself about getting Zim to find a cure. He finally attached something to his hand and we waited on the route that Zim would take to walk home. By the time school let out, Dib was far enough along in his transformation that he almost didn't look like himself anymore. I was standing on 2 feet behind Dib with my arms around his neck and continuously licking at his ear when Zim showed up. I know all about your little trick, Zim, Meat Dib said, ignoring the dog licks and me clinging to him. I must admit it's a pretty good joke. Turning me into meat, knowing Liz wouldn't be able to resist eventually eating me. I think that's the type of plan that deserves some praise. Dib extended his hand towards Zim, who looked at it. Finally, Zim said in a low voice, the day has come. It's about time you acknowledge me as the superior being I so am. It shall make my victory sweeter to know that— Ah! Zim had gone to shake Dib's hand, but jumped back from it in pain. Dib stood tall, laughing with the tack on his hand, and I continued licking with the dogs. Joke's on you, Zim, Dib shouted. Now you have to find a cure for the baloney thing. Zim snatched the tack away from Dib and cried, Fool! You think I would share the cure with you? I'll find a cure, and keep it all to myself, and then watch you transform more and more into what you really are deep down in your heart. Deep down in baloney? Dib asked, confused. It would on inside counts, Dib, I said, still fixated, and on inside you delectable. That's just dumb, Dib said. Dumb like a moose, Dib, dumb like a moose. And he ran off. Hey, wait, Dib shouted after him. The cure! But more dogs ran over and we all chased him back to his house, where he locked all the dogs but me outside. An hour had gone by and Dib had to fight me to keep me from taking a bite out of him. He finally put a leash and collar on me and tied me to the leg of the couch and went into the kitchen. The doorbell rang and Zim and Dib came into the room to answer it. There was Zim, and I smelled more delicious meat. The dogs, Zim cried. "After my juicy meat body of bologna meats!" I was barking and drooling all over the place because the two were making me so hungry. "Zim," said Dib, "what are you doing here?" "My base, my labs," explained Zim. "They don't think I'm really me. The transformation is so bad it sees me as a different creature now. I must use your labs." "You want to use my labs?" "It's the only way," Zim said with plea. "I must find a cure. Quickly, the dogs, listen to them." Indeed, the dogs were barking and howling just the same as I was. "You know," Zim looked at Dib, "it would benefit you as well." "Just this once," Dib agreed. "We work together. Mortal enemies working together for the common good." "Be quiet," Zim shouted at him, and they went down to Membrane's lab. I kept barking and howling until Gaz came in and threw a steak at me. "Shut up, she-wolf!" I finally shut up as I tore into my steak. After a couple of hours, I couldn't smell the Bologna boys at all, and was back to normal. The smells of them brought me so far back into my primitive state that I couldn't even figure out how to get myself out of a leash and collar. When I was out of my hypnotic state, I undid the leash and ripped off the collar. My therapist had given a couple of collar and leash sets to my foster folks and told them to tie me down if I get too savage. I gave one set to the Membranes 2 years ago for the same purpose. I do occasionally go back to pure instinct and not really know what I'm doing. Like a couple of days ago when I bit into that boy's hand that was bullying Zim, or when a rat jumped on Dib's head and I chased it out the classroom. Those are just minor instances so far. It's been a year since I've gone into complete savage mode until I got a whiff of Bologna Dib. I fought it off for the most part, but otherwise I probably would have eaten him.